Evening and welcome to the 15th meeting of fiscal year 2025
Recording in progress.
for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to now call the meeting to order. If we would like to begin, we can begin by introductions of the board and our staff. Who would like to start?
Sean Fahey, member.
Jim Davis, member.
Cheryl Tagayas, secretary.
Maggie Oakfield, member.
And Meredith Hall serving as chair. And with us this evening, our staff, we have Cheyenne.
Cheyenne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development.
Julia.
Julia Getman, clerk.
And unfortunately, Tim's son is ill and he's not able to be with us this evening. But we just want to publicly express just our thanks to Tim for all of his work on behalf of the town of Milton and wish him the best in his new job. So thank you. And now we can start with our administrative items, approval of our minutes. And we have a few sets here. We'll need to vote these separately since Sean, you weren't at the couple you were absent for.
Sure.
So let's just go through these individually. So first we can start with the approval of the minutes for October 10th. If everyone has had a chance to review, if I could have a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from October 10th.
Second?
Second.
Okay, and we'll do all in favor.
Aye.
Sean, you abstain. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Next set of minutes we have is from Wednesday, October 23rd. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
Yep.
Okay, if I could have a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for October 23rd.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. There was actually minutes from the 24th also, which was just our brief continual our public hearing that we continued. Sean and Cheryl, both of you were both absent. It was just a formality meeting, but if I could have a motion to approve those
Make a
minutes.
motion to approve the minutes of October 24th.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Thank you. And then we had the last set, and I don't know if everyone had a chance to review these, November 7th. We had a set of meeting
Good.
minutes, and we were all present, so we can all vote. If I could have a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for November 7th.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So those are approved.
Cheryl, excuse me. Just so you know, I left the minutes there for you to sign on a clipboard.
I see them. Yeah. Where would you like me to leave them, on the table?
Sure, or on my desk.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so our next meeting dates we have scheduled, the next meeting would be our December 12th regularly scheduled meeting. We didn't finalize a second meeting date in December, but I think if we could try to schedule one maybe the week before when we typically would meet. So that would be the 19th. How is everybody's week that week? And it could be another day too if that
Yeah, I'm good.
didn't work. I just didn't want to go into the following week where we're getting so close to the holidays.
That's okay.
Cheyenne, are you in
I will
town?
not be here the 16th or the 23rd.
Could you do the 19th?
16th through the
16th through the
23rd. I think she
Oh, I'm
said.
sorry, 16th through the 23rd. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so, the 12th.
Do we need her?
Just if we're running, letting people in. I don't know. Julia, are you able to run a meeting with admitting folks for a citizens speak, or if we have someone come, applicant?
Can the cable TV guys do it? Is it Sean?
Yeah.
Could they do it?
We could probably have the MATV people come, and then I could do like practice sessions with Julia just so she's more comfortable, so they can tag team that.
Okay. All right, then that I think would be fine, just so we can, if we do have things, site plan approval, ADU, we could, not miss another meeting on discussions.
Cool.
So tentatively, let's schedule, and I'll finalize everything. But so the 12th and the 19th will be the next meeting dates. That's great. And Cheyenne, was there anything you wanted to add as far as planning updates?
So we just have one update, and it's going to be about our ADU that we're working on. We got word from the building department. They're very interested in the work we're going to be doing. So whenever we're ready, they would love it if we could share the document with them so that they can provide additional comments.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. So at this time, we now can offer citizen speak. If there's anyone from the public or on Zoom, if you'd like to raise your hand, if you're on the call, but if you're in person, please feel free to come, or if there's something that's on our agenda, you'll be able to speak at that time too. So.
Does that have to speak when it comes up on the agenda?
Yes. When the item is on the agenda, we'll welcome you to come and speak, or you can speak now. That's, by the way. Okay, good. Welcome.
Good evening.
You can just pull one of those mics closer to you. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully this works. So this will be quick, but Matt Morong, 136 Elliott Street. And I just want to take a moment, I wish he was here, but to thank Tim on the record for the work that he's done for this town and for the planning board and for the people interested in planning within Milton. I really think that Tim brought an uncommon level of professionalism, intelligence, and with all that he went through, also a good sense of humor in the whole process. And I enjoyed the time that I interacted with him, and he's going to be sorely missed. So I just wanted to get that out there.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's, yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Okay. Cheyenne, is there anyone else? Are you seeing in Citizen Speak?
Nobody on Zoom.
At another time. Okay, great. So we can now move to new business for our East Milton overlay zoning presentation on the draft design guidelines from MAPC. And if we can let Josh in the room.
Yes, he is on screen and he should be ready to go.
Okay.
And I think actually you need to make me a co-host or no, panelist so I can actually share.
Let's see.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Welcome.
There's not an option to make you a panel.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Oh, here we go.
Someone.
There you go.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Evening.
Good to see you all.
Hello, Josh. Good to see you too.
All right, so just as a refresher, we had provided the board draft zoning language for East Milton Square based upon the process that we've gone through over the last probably more than a year and a half now. And then we had extended the contract through the end of this month to give us additional space to provide design guidelines for the district that would complement that zoning. And we provided that as well, and I can walk through that document. I don't have a companion presentation. I thought it would actually be more effective if we did want to just scroll through the deliverable itself and take a look at that together. Additionally, in a last minute addition, I apologize for that, but I sent along to Cheyenne yesterday in another deliverable, which is a commentary memo, which provides background, some additional narrative about the zoning recommendations themselves, and just outlined some future considerations that we've talked about in this process, but we just want to make sure we're memorialized in some way. So provided that to the town as well.
That's great, Josh. Yeah, I think that if you want to walk through the presentation that is on our website and that you have put forth for the design guidelines, that would be great. I did talk to Tim. I think we'll want to also have a future meeting in the near future just to discuss the actual zoning language, because we haven't really had a chance to walk through that yet. But I also wanted to make sure that members had a chance to review the zoning language separately. But for tonight, I think it's great. The presentation looks wonderful. So if you want to walk us through that.
Sure, excellent. And I think reviewing the proposed zoning language in tandem with that commentary memo might actually be helpful as well for the board.
Great.
I will share the design guidelines document now. Actually, I'm sending a share request. It looks like I have to send a share request, and then maybe someone can grant that for me.
All set.
All right, thank you. Great, so hopefully you can all see that now on the screen. Make that full screen for you. All right, so this is the East Milton Square design guideline document. It is modeled closely on the Milton Village design guideline document. I know that you all went through, the planning board went through a substantial process to put those together. And I know that all the details that are captured in those design guidelines were put there purposefully and with a lot of thought. So we did model this very closely on those design guidelines, both in its structure of its content, but also in the details of the guidelines themselves. Of course, focusing on the information and guidance that is most relevant, only relevant to East Milton Square. There was, for example, a fair amount of guideline language in the Milton Village guidance around the change in topography on sites, and that is not as applicable to the East Milton Square area. So the outline of the document, we begin with an introduction, its connection to the zoning itself, the intent behind the guidelines, how they're organized, a bit about the process that led to this point, beyond our process, and inclusive of, for example, the Looking Forward East Milton Square study, and then ties directly to the design standard language, which is embedded in the zoning language. So there's a direct connection and some, I think a good leveling of requirements for the board to use in review of projects, where you have design standards, which are required as a part of the zoning, and that gives you the ability to really, I think, work in close partnership and have a strong voice in that review process in a site plan review with the proponents. And then these design guidelines are not required in the same way as design standards, but do offer a lot more detail about what's intended and how the outcome could be guided to the best benefit of East Milton Square. There's a little bit of history and context around East Milton Square, just to give people, proponents particularly, the benefit of that knowledge. A little bit of discussion around architectural styles, as there was in the Milton Village design guidelines, and then bringing forward some of the principles and vision language, which was, I think, very carefully outlined in the Looking Forward study. So embedding that in this document as well. Then the design guidelines are organized in the same topics as the Milton Village design guidelines were: building design, public realm, vehicular access, landscaping, lighting, signage, and sustainability. And I think pretty comprehensive set of guidelines, which is what the feedback was that we heard through this process, that the community is interested in having a comprehensive set of guidelines. I won't go through the front end with too much, belabor it too much beyond what I've already described, but you can see some of that language in this, connecting it to the zoning, connecting it to the design standards. And then this just flipping through the history and the context, which I think is, fascinating. East Milton Square has a lot to be proud of, and a strong connection to industry and the railway, of course. Architectural styles highlight some of the significant buildings and have an overall plan diagram of the district on the page. Focus in on some of those key properties and their key features, much in the same way that this was done. If you sort of opened up the Milton Village guidelines and had them side by side, you would recognize the layout and character of these sort of identifying key properties and their architectural styles and features. And this is where we bring forward the Looking Forward study and the work that went there, and making sure that it's not just a document sitting on a shelf, but really does help form and inform future projects in East Milton Square and is a part of the vision going forward. And then the guidelines themselves, we have both language and just in terms of the structure that you see on this page. So there's the first sort of topic, as you saw in the content. Would be the building design guidelines, and then each of the different topic areas, like for example, siting of the building structures themselves, and then a fair amount of guidance on each of the topics. We include in the blue call-out boxes the actual zoning design standard language. So that's what's from the proposed zoning bylaw language, and the direct connection between those standards and these guidelines is apparent in both the topics and the way that it's described in more detail here. And then we also have both photographic and diagrammatic illustrations of some of the ideas that are talked about, much in the same way as the Milton Village work was put together.
Right.
Just moving along, I'll just flip through these. I don't think we need to. Of course, if there's some topic that you'd like to zero in on, you can all let me know.
We're only still seeing the cover page of the report. Are you?
Oh, no.
Sorry.
We're
not seeing the next slides.
Let me see. I flipped through a few now.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's great. So that's helpful.
Let me just go back.
Okay.
Now is it flipping?
Yes.
My apologies. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so this was the content I described verbally and the outline. Just flipping back through so you can see it. This is where the language is that ties it back to the zoning, the brief history and context for East Milton Square. That's the diagrammatic plan that I mentioned with some of the key properties highlighted. And then this is what I was describing. It's laid out in much the same fashion as the Milton Village design guidelines are, with key structures, their features and architectural character and historical relevance as well. These are the connections to the looking forward study and bringing that into this document so it can have a direct application to the continuing visioning and sort of delivery of that vision through future redevelopment projects. Then this is the beginning of the guidelines themselves. As I noted, the blue call-out boxes referencing the zoning language, the photographic and diagrammatic illustrations to help add flavor and some character to the language and, I think add some direction to the language as well. And then you can see this moves within building design. We have a fair amount of topics, for example, siting of structures, architectural context, building form, height, scale, and massing. And then each of those have additional language. We've tried to number them and make sense of this document, for example, so that if you're in the process of review, you could both reference a page number, page 14. You could also reference, say, section 4, roofs, and item 2 within roofs, which is about pitched roofs, as you move through this document with a proponent to say, could you describe for us the slope on that pitched roof and how it relates to this guideline? Facades as well. You can see both the imagery is, I would say, in some cases, highlighting the type of outcome that's desired, and in other cases, highlighting the existing context and how that context should be shaping a future project as well. And we've tried to be very selective about the images that we've chosen that we think reflect the character and style and vision that we've heard through the discussion with the community, really trying to focus on that village character that is so desired and responsive to the sort of historic New England character that East Milton Square has today. So just now getting through the building guidelines and shifting to the public realm, which is an important feature of this. Of course, public realm being that portion of the sidewalk between the building front and the curb, also inclusive of some of the character along the street edge as well, both with on-street parking and potential for some additional smaller open spaces or parklets. You can see some of those ideas in the photographs on this page. and how landscape might relate to adding amenity to the public realm as well. Think practical items such as bicycle parking integrated with other utilitarian functions in the public realm, and then how it relates to vehicular access as well. Reducing the impact of parking, thinking about landscaping, some of the guidelines around plant materials, streetscape, buffers to residential properties. That was a big idea about that fine line in this tight and compact mixed use and commercial district, the business district of East Milton Square, and its very nearby residential abutters. Some of the lighting, focusing on lighting of the buildings, lighting of the signs, some site lighting as well. And these are supplementary to the overall signage requirements that are in the existing bylaw. Some on stormwater management and sustainability. And that is the design guidelines document. And we think it provides the planning board with a robust tool to really, if of course you have to review the zoning in more detail, but the idea there is that the zoning proposals that we put forward are to have the review occur at the site plan review level, not a special permit level. And therefore, the design guidelines are an important feature of that so that the expectations of the board can be aligned with those of a developer who might bring forward some investment proposals.
That's great. Well, I was very pleased to read this and to look through it. I think you really captured the essence of what we were hearing at the forums and what sort of the vision that we wanted for that area to have. Any questions from the board on the design guidelines?
I just have a couple of general questions, Josh. You mentioned that these are patterned on the guidelines in Milton Village, which we don't have any experience with yet because we haven't had an application come in under that overlay zoning. So have you developed guidelines like these, or have you seen guidelines like these that have been implemented in other communities? And have you heard any feedback about how well that goes, or if there's just some background as to the extent of the guidelines and other people's experiences with something similar?
Yeah, I think the feedback I've heard is that they are a useful. So yes, I think the short answer is yes. We have produced similar guidelines, both in terms of the depth and detail and sort of the I guess character of the guidelines themselves, in terms of the use of the text, diagrams, and photographs. I think the feedback we've heard is that they are useful as level setting with the development team to give them, as they begin, even really the pre-development work before maybe even you might even know about a project as a board, that they will pick up this type of document. And I think in most cases try to be responsive to what the town would like to see, because of course that makes their process go smoother if they can show that responsiveness. And then I think in the actual review of the project itself, it depends a lot on sort of the going back to the zoning itself and the scale, financial feasibility. And I think oftentimes there are, I would say, more critical dynamics at play that might drive some of the decision making, both on the development side of things, but also on the planning board's side of review. I think when you get to those big picture ideas about sort of what will make or break a project, it's maybe not at this design guideline level, but then once you kind of get those major potential issues ironed out in the review with the project proponent, then I think it's at that point that you do return to the design guidelines and talk about, how this element or architectural feature or how it relates to the sidewalk, how that could be a little different. And what we've heard is the guidelines actually give the town the ability to make that conversation happen in a way that it doesn't feel like you're just inventing things out of nowhere, but that you can point to this document and say, well, this is in here and we'd like to see this type of approach.
And do you think it gives enough flexibility for project applicants and their design teams? Or do you think it's more like a set of instructions that tells them this is how they have to design a project?
No, I think they will assert that flexibility is what we've experienced. And so because they are guidelines, they are advisory, I think it's good to have them be I think this level of detail is not a bad thing. They will let you know, the proponent team will let you know if there's something that they can't comply with or can't accomplish. We did, I think in the zoning language itself, the draft zoning language, we did, as a part of the site plan review process requirements, ask for a narrative describing how the project relates to these guidelines and the design standards. And I think that narrative would be helpful to zero in on those places where they might be seeking that type of flexibility. But it's not, I don't think, I think it's more about the zoning requirements in terms of it's an impact on feasibility. It's not necessarily about these guidelines. And I think that therefore the detail is a good thing because it gives you more of those entries into asking for what you want and what you want to see.
The reason I ask also is, you know that Milton Village is special permit only. It's not site plan approval, which is different procedurally, which we've been talking a lot about, the site plan approval process. So because what we've heard about site plan approval and guidelines for uses that are as of right is that you can't make the guidelines so either vague, number one, or such that a project becomes infeasible. So I'm just kind of trying to prod on this just to make sure we don't go kind of too far on it and get rejected maybe at the Attorney General level, or at some other level on it.
Could I jump into this because I think you know, when I read through this, Josh, the chosen word that you used is should.
Yeah.
You know, should exists as a common word throughout the document. I don't think I saw must anywhere. So, yeah. I mean, should, I think, gives the board the flexibility to either accept, you know, what an applicant.
It's not shall, yeah.
Shall, right, exactly. And I guess to continue with the question that Cheryl was asking, that seems to me to give the board the flexibility to, you know, to go either way. You know, I think there's one piece that I saw in there that a facade, you know, should never have a blank wall that's more than 10 feet by 12 feet. Do you know what I mean? But you know, that doesn't mean that you can't. But it kind of suggests that, you know, that's not what you want. But, you know, I'm hopeful that the use of the word should creates flexibility both for the board and for someone who has, you know, an intention to do something.
Yeah, so the question really that I was getting at is if, like, say the board says, at times this has happened, you know, we really want brick on that building. And the guideline and the developer says, well, your guidelines, you know, allow us to use various materials. And let's say, like, that's something like that is used for 8 grounds of denial.
Sure.
Where it's supposed to be as of right. You know, I just want we want enough protections that give us the teeth that we've all talked about needing a little bit. But I do become a little concerned about going a little too far with it on something that's not discretionary, you know, because this is not, the site plan approval process is not. So that's why I was just asking if there's other towns that have done it successfully. It'd be great to hear about it. It'd be great to see their guidelines. Just to feel that, or to get at that sense of comfort that this is a level which has been successful elsewhere on a as of right kind of proposal.
So I guess a question, because I understand what you're saying, and you know, I know the situation we don't want to be in, right? Do you think that there might be some particular sections of language that might be better if it's replaced with shall? You know, some things that are just so important that you don't want to be in that situation?
Well, I think that's where the zoning, you know, it needs to be the shall. We talked about this in Milton Village too. The zoning needs to be the shall, and the guidelines need to be the should or desired. It's really incumbent upon the board members to not use the guidelines as a tool for denial. You know, in my view, it's a guideline to negotiate the kind of design that people have expressed, you know, as the desire. And, you know, someone might read it as saying, well, it's so prescriptive that I have to copy an existing historic building. So they come in with that because that's what they see here, you know, whereas they can also do a successful design that picks up on the characteristics of the historic building, but not duplicate them. So when we have something that gives them so much information, I think, let's just say that I, as a person who might be designing a building in a community, I see something like this, I'd want to like really pretty well understand if this is being dictated, you know, so that before I start designing that building. So I think it's about setting an expectation that we want to see applications and we want to see thoughtful design, but we're not necessarily asking for something that's going to push the costs out of line such that we don't see any applications, right? So there's a balance. And I'm just asking Josh and his professional opinion, have we hit the right balance here? And just because I'm a little concerned that we might not have. I'm not saying we haven't, but I just want to see what the experience has been elsewhere too. You know, I think it's disappointing that we haven't seen an application thus far in Milton Village after all the effort that went into that. And I'd hate to kind of find that what we're doing is like causing any concern for an applicant in some of this work. So that's all.
Well, the good thing is we know that there are projects coming in the Milton Village. They're just, for various reasons, having to do some pre-work before they come to us.
Well, you're an architect and have been one for a long time and very successful, and you must read design guidelines often. Do you find what we have here to be restrictive to you?
I'd like to reread it. You know, we got the general overview here, and I'd like to take another look at it. But so my first reaction was yes, it's very similar to Milton Village. And I see Milton Village architecture differently than I see East Milton's because you have, you know, the character of the buildings in Milton Village, you know, is pretty recognizable as having a lot of historic character. I personally don't view some of the buildings in East Milton Square the same way, and I know that's can be a judgment value. I'm not judging anyone else's opinion on that. So I do think there's more opportunity for flexibility in East Milton, you know, in terms of how it develops. You know, you've got the highway cutting right through it. You've got just considerations that you don't have Milton Village. You don't have a 8 or 10 lane highway, kind of the face of one street or two streets. You know, so it does. You know, there's a lot of talk about it being a village, but it's a village that's cut off by a really big highway. Yeah. And that sets up different kinds of design considerations, I think, which maybe these don't contemplate.
Yeah, and I'm not, you know, and I understand the differences architecturally between, you know, the two locations. I'm asking more about rigidity, flexibility, regardless of the different architectural. You know what I mean? Because I think really what you're saying is you don't want to deter anyone from a development, you know, plan if your design guideline doesn't allow them the flexibility that, right? That's what I'm asking. I'm not talking about differences. I don't really care much about the difference in the architecture. I just mean for someone who has this challenge often, you know, because I think at the end of the day, we want that. We want to encourage somebody to, you know, to develop. Mm-hmm. And we don't want a document that discourages them from development because they feel like they can't come before the board and succeed.
Right, so so that comes back to really how the board intends to use them, and it's not just this board, but boards in the future.
Right.
So,
Well, I think
so
it's-
generally speaking, I mean, there's it covers everything. I'd like to go through and see, and just give it another look through and see whether, to answer your question,
Yeah,
whether I think
yeah,
it's too
sure.
rigid.
Yeah.
But that's why I asked Josh if he can tell us, like,
was
whatever
good.
community, Needham, Lexington, it doesn't matter to me which, has something similar. Here's some of the buildings that have come in and been approved under that zoning, just to give us an idea. Because I think some people have said other communities have some nice new development.
Right.
How did that get done? Was it under something similar to this? That's just what I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious about.
It's a great
And
question.
that may be a question that comes up at a public forum too. That wouldn't work.
But we also, I mean, during the zoning process, there's an opportunity for the pre-application meeting.
Right.
And we could reiterate Cheryl's message at that point. Just say, look, we've got these great guidelines, but you don't have to stick to these. I mean, depending on the parcel that they're trying to redevelop. I mean, I think this is great. I love what Josh did.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's very detailed. It hits a lot of different things. And I wouldn't be expecting to see every single architectural feature on every building. So
The goal is to make it easier for developers to have an idea
Right.
that they don't spend money, because we've seen it, the Gardner School, for example, they go to great expense with architectural designs or plans, which might not be at all, something that we would be looking for. And this, by having that pre-meeting, they get a sense of what we're looking for so that they can design to that and sort of create. I think our goal is to create, and the concern with East Milton is we have these historic buildings, but then we have these non-historic buildings that I think should be torn down and redeveloped. But we want to encourage a cohesive neighborhood in East Milton. And we can't change that there's a highway there, but we can change sort of a cohesive, giving context to that area. And I think this is the goal to get there with new construction and new buildings to replace some of the buildings that don't connect to the rest of the town.
Well, I think maybe an example for us is to look back at 440. Had this been in place before 440, it probably would have been a better process for everybody, for the developer, for the board, and for the community. So it should be very helpful in the future.
Well, these guidelines, or maybe it was the zoning itself, I read both today, basically require the renovation or the retention of buildings 1940 or before, regardless, depending upon where it's written, regardless of their historic character. So the question is, does that automatically to prevent a 440 Granite Ave, right? Because there were several buildings that are probably built before 1940. So are we looking to put zoning in place that allows for redevelopment or stops redevelopment? Because you can write zoning that stops development, which is basically what we have now.
Yeah.
The parking requirements that we have in our current business district zoning prevent any redevelopment because you can't park it, so you can't build it. So I'd hate to have us have spent all these years working on something that kind of puts us back in that same spot. So I think we should, one of the things I've flagged for myself is to go back and look at which buildings are 1940 and earlier. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Josh, because the number of buildings that's in one of these documents has it up to 1950. It doesn't have a cutoff at 1940, so I don't know how many buildings are actually cut off at 1940. I think it's in your memorandum. Let me just see.
Josh, did you want to run through your memorandum? Was that
Yeah, I
something
can
you
do it.
wanted to do this evening?
Sure.
just feel like we have time
Cheryl's
to-
most recent question on the date. So that is in the zoning language, and it's
Okay.
1940 in the zoning language. And it's not necessarily that it has to be retained. I don't think that's the intention. It's more that that would trigger a additional referral to Milton Historical Commission in consideration of the historical or architectural significance of those structures. So it's just, I think, an extra layer of review. And if that additional layer of review found that the structure was not significant, then I think, it wouldn't be important to the zoning that it be retained.
That's how I read it also. I remember reading that.
Yeah, so there was, I don't see it in the memo, but like the percent of buildings that were built up, 1940 wasn't a cutoff. So it was like, we don't know how many are the 1940. But
What year was the Santander Bank?
I don't know.
Nothing.
See, I don't know.
50s or 60s.
I think they had that in one of they had the dates in one of the diagrams before.
The significance of 1940 was really that it captured the Adams Building on Granite Avenue, the post office, the Arts Center, and the Edge Hill Road Early Learning Center. So those were, it does not, for example, capture the Milton Fire Department, which is 1952. But those of the featured historical structures in the design guidelines, 4 out of the 5 are pre-1940.
So, and I don't know if this is a good time to go back and look at the map. The map that we have, the boundary map, Josh, maybe that's something because I had expressed concern. I don't know how the other members feel. I think the post office, which is on the National Historic Register, I think I would like to have that taken out of the map. And I'm also thinking the Milton Arts Center, if the projects that we don't want to see, like to Cheryl's point, redeveloped as mixed use. I'm not saying not redeveloped, but I'm saying as a mixed use, that post office, you don't have the space to really do it, and I would be afraid it would be torn down and somebody would try to redevelop that site.
Or make it housing, and then it would lose, the public would lose the ability to appreciate it, because I love that
That post
the post office, and I love the East Milton Library. I still call it that, even though it's the Art Center. And
the Milton Arts Center is just such a gift to our town. I would hate to
I know.
I would hate to have
developer want to come in and
for housing.
It's a nice lot. The whole backyard is grass.
Yeah.
I've seen tents set up there in the summer where the kids are doing
And I feel like if we
projects.
ever had a project, we could look at it and we could approve something with a special permit, or we could add it to the district later if we felt like we needed to. But I felt like that might be risky for structures that we don't want to potentially lose.
What structures do you think are realistically redevelopable on this map?
The fruit center,
The gas stations,
100%
possibly.
the fruit center.
I know I like having a gas station in town, but I don't know that we need 3. I would love to. If you look at the map here,
Citizens Bank building.
So yeah, I was going to ask about the Citizens Bank. What year was that? Because they've recently painted it. And
That
I
looks
think
new. That looks like
it
80s,
looks,
I'm guessing.
I feel like it's lost its charm.
But to Josh's point, it does say, historical significance as deemed by the Historical Society. And I doubt they would
Commission.
look at commission. Okay, doubt they'd look at the Citizens Bank and say, oh, that's got some historical significance. I'm sure they'd say, do what
and
you want over there.
and the example with that was there was the structures that were on 440 Granite. Those came before the Historical Commission, and those were not considered historically significant. Even though some of them had the dates of being very old, they had been altered so dramatically that they didn't retain any historical value.
I think individually there aren't many, Cheryl, in my opinion.
Same.
It just requires consolidation, probably to make something more developable.
I mean, if you go back to your question about 440 Granite Ave, I do think the Citizens Kiosk, which is mostly a parking lot, is probably a candidate.
It's a big lot.
Yeah.
And then going
Obviously,
up
the
to,
fruit center is the largest parcel, but, unless that kind of use doesn't succeed any longer, that I see that as less likely to change. So I don't really see, especially given the restrictions that are put on the zoning in terms of 3 stories and having a lot of parking, that we're really setting this up for very many to be redone at all.
You know, I think the reality of it is that the development opportunities are better on the post office side of East Milton than on the, call it the real business district of East Milton. I think the lots and are larger. And I understand what you're saying about the post office. I think it's a beautiful building too. But, from a development opportunity, the Art Center has a piece of land that could be developed and probably be a really nice project. But it's hard to envision anything over on the other side of town, in around, Adams Street. It's just so difficult. They're so small, and it would take a significant amount of consolidation.
Assemblage.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to see the fire station demolished, but the structures that are to the right, those, and I'm looking at, I think the
Those
numbers-
houses behind it?
the houses
Yeah, they-
behind it that are,
Go.
those are not, I would not find them to be architecturally significant. And 400, 408, 410, I think those, each individual is small, but if you assemble, if
Right.
those
Yeah.
were assembled, I can see that as a potential.
Just a thought, and I don't know what the future of our postal service is, but it's always a possibility that the post office will not operate as a post office for a long period of time. I mean, postal is probably, most locations aren't nearly the size of that building, especially for a community like ours. It's much smaller, but, I would hate to see it to be a building that's shuttered and abandoned, and because this becomes so restrictive, nothing happens to it. You know what I mean? If it doesn't operate as a post office. So.
Well, to Maggie's point, commercial would be beneficial, but residential potentially in the future. But I think the mixed use.
If you take it out, then you're not going to be residential. You mean like one house?
This time. No, I mean, it could be, it could be.
You wouldn't be able to do it though under zoning.
Well, I'm thinking a second story on the back where it's flat, where they do all their mail sorting.
Still can't do it if you don't include it in this zoning though.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Because
that's zoned commercial, that is zoned commercial
Yes,
currently?
I think that's in the business district
District,
now.
yeah.
That's the,
So
well,
That's in the
we can look it
purple.
up.
I think it's something that we just
a new
shouldn't rush
parcel.
to do, but I mean, the board can decide to include it, but I feel like we could always add it later.
It's,
Because to your point, the post office may not always be operating as a post
color.
office.
Yeah.
I just would like to
Which is
have
currently in the business
control,
district.
a little bit more control of the future of it.
I don't, listen, I'm with you. Architecturally, it might be one
It's
of
on the
the
National Register. It's
one of the most beautiful buildings in Milton, architecturally, I think. I'm a builder, though. You're an architect. But it's beautiful.
well, and that it has that history of the mural in the interior,
Yeah.
which, is valuable. I just think that I agree with Sean to have some concern about having so many restrictions that if the post office did close down, what could it be used for in the future? And what, one of the things that we've talked about when you, if it's a high hurdle for somebody to come in and do what a 440 Granite Ave developer did, or what the 40B developers do, and there's a lot more expense associated with it. So you might make something more likely to happen if the path is clear to somebody when they're looking at a piece of property. So it's not to say that somebody wouldn't want to come later and do condos, but maybe because of the path that they have to take to get there, they want to do more because they're building in a process that's going to take them 2 years and maybe some lawsuits, to get it done versus something where that's the beauty of a site plan approval is that's a process that they see the end game, and having the guidelines helps guide them to get to that end game. There's no doubt about it. I agree that we should have the guidelines. 100%. I just want to make sure that we're not over, kind of going a little too far with them. But back to that kind of idea of that parcel is, if we don't include it and it's just a business use that's allowed in there, I mean, what kind of business use and what kind of protections are in our current business zoning? Not very much. There's very little protection. There's nothing about preserving the historic character of the building if somebody wants to put a business use in there. There's far more protections in this with all these guidelines and so forth. So will we go back and change the business zoning, to accommodate or to account for the fact that we have historic buildings that we excluded? It's something to think about. One of the things too, even with the, we haven't talked about with this zoning that I've been thinking about as we think about the fruit center, application is, this is recommended to be included in this overlay, but no change in the underlying zoning, so it still sits in that residential. And is that the best thing? Should we look at making the map consistent between this and the business district, so that you don't have two different kind of processes depending, or even boundaries, kind of depending upon which path someone takes. So those are just a few of my thoughts about this.
So to your point, that it has been a struggle, like the fruit center, it has been a struggle. But we've also heard recently just all the concerns the neighbors have. So would we be negating their concerns by putting it 100% in the commercial district? Because then they'll be able to kind of do whatever they want. They would have been able to put a bar in sort of as of right. So that's my concern. And I might not have had that concern a few months ago, but because of the application of the bar, now it has been brought to light that if we put that in the commercial, is it okay to do a bar? And the other thing, even our commercial district, I asked Tim, what are our hours of operation, in our commerstell district? And it doesn't matter what business type it is, but if you wanted to be, Stella's restaurant and you want to open up at 5 a.m. to cater to plumbers or whatever, can they do that as of right? And I recall the Dunkin' Donuts had to go and get special permission to open, I think, at 4:30 maybe a.m. to make their donuts, or 5. And I was a little surprised at that because it's our commercial district. So I would have thought that they would have been able to have a longer business use. So I'm not, I don't know what our actual business hours are in our business district.
Tim, did he get back to you?
Yeah, he said there aren't any.
There aren't any.
So I was a little surprised. And I understand in the residential, you have different business uses. So that was just a basic question. What hours can you operate?
So in a situation like that, at the fruit center, does that mean they can start taking deliveries at 5 in the morning?
They operate under special permits there,
Oh, no, but
whereas I don't think Dunkin' operates under special permits.
Oh, no, I know, but if
Yeah.
we
They
go
do
ahead
have
and
hours.
implement the zoning, now the fruit center is in the commercial district, so can they do whatever they want? Not whatever they want.
CVS gets deliveries late night.
Yeah,
And I think, and
right.
then the fruit center, they try to keep their loading dock closed off, but I think the trucks sometimes will come and.
With this zoning, they won't have to.
Right.
Well, this zoning is mixed use overlay zoning, where they have setback requirements that they don't have with the current building. This building is pretty close to the property line, and I think depending upon what you consider, I guess Bassett Street might be considered the front yard, in which case that would be a side yard. And I don't recall what the side yard was listed as here, but if it's adjacent to a residential, I think it's at least 10 feet. But
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, so what does that mean? If they don't have 10 feet, they can't operate as a commercial,
Then-
they get kicked out of the commercial
Well,
district? Or-
I guess
don't
it's-
understand.
this is not the commercial, right? This is the mixed use overlay?
Sorry, mixed use
Yeah.
overlay,
So
right.
if obviously they're pre-existing non-conforming, so as long as they continue with their current kind of business uses and their special permits, then they continue, regardless of any change to the zoning. But if they wanted to file for an application under this new overlay, and they were going to tear this building down and build something new, then they would have to conform to this zoning, which would require a greater setback. So just in terms of like some of the
Conditions, I'm thinking they're conditions that are on the property right now, like the delivery schedule.
I mean, so like if the fruit center stayed and they built apartments there or
They
condos
didn't build
there?
anything, they just kept it the way it is, but all of a sudden there's now mixed use overlay zoning. Did their conditions
Oh, no,
go away?
nothing changes. The zoning is just an opportunity. It
Or it's like
doesn't
another
change.
layer, right?
Just another layer. So only if they wanted to change what they were doing on their property would any of this apply.
So they would have
And
to,
somebody could apply under the business zoning, even if this is sitting there. So an overlay means the underlying is staying,
yep.
and this is another opportunity for the property owner.
But I'm sorry, Maggie, if it's by right, they still have to apply for the new zoning?
Now this is like, if we're talking, no, they don't have to
Isn't this
apply
by right? What we're trying to pass now is going to be by right?
as an option, only an option.
Option by right. So if they
Yes,
choose
it
the
is by-
option,
If
then
they choose the option.
they
Yes.
get the classification.
They don't need to change anything if they continue their operation, right? But if they did decide they wanted to take advantage of something under this zoning, they would have to add housing, right?
So they have to add housing.
If they're,
That's-
if
that's the
they're
part-
applying
That's
under
why
that.
That's the
my
part that I was
concern.
missing. That's what I was
my
missing.
concern with the
Yeah.
post
Got it.
office.
Okay, got it.
It has to be, it has to be a mixed use purpose, which is nearly impossible within the structure as it exists right now.
It would have to be where you're talking about, where the trucks are in the back.
Yeah, that
See,
second
that's
floor
the-
is ripe for, I'm sorry,
that's
that
the-
roof that we walked on is ripe
It's
for us.
only 3 floors.
Or
that's
they'd
allowed
go up,
here.
they'd go 3 floors, because right
About
now.
3
Yeah,
Yeah,
you go
so
3.
'cause currently it's 2 floors. So if they take advantage, they can do apartments
Remember,
up on the 3rd floor.
50% of the first floor in this has to be commercial anyway. So you could keep that nice lobby space commercial, little cafe, and then you could do something else with the rest as a mixed use.
Gotcha.
So I think that gives more opportunity for it to be preserved. I think I've said this before, than just limiting it to the underlying business. It's not that somebody couldn't still do it as a business. And, with the opportunity that they would have to come in and work back and forth, with 50% of it needing to be business, they wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. So where would you put the business? It would make sense to put it in that ground floor where the public portions of the building are. I think the rest of that probably first floor is not very attractive from what I see from the lobby.
So
But-
the other area that I do see the potential for redevelopment, because I think there's more than, and it's not everything for, certainly, but I don't think that East Milton, the residents who came out at the forum did not want to see the entire square redeveloped. That was clear. They didn't want dramatic change. That's why the height was important, certain things. But if you start at the rebuilt fitnesses from that building, all of those buildings, when you drive by, if you look at where the pediatric office is, I don't know if it's a dental office too in there, but there's some really small, very dated, not historic buildings that run along Adam Street between the rebuilt fitness up to 440 Granite. And I think that's a potential area. All of those buildings, I think, could be redeveloped and would make have really nice office space in the commercial on the first floor and residential above. That's where I see just the need all along that area of Granite Avenue is prime for that to be redeveloped
I think you're right.
without redeveloping the historic older buildings.
I think the real way to get more development is to, unfortunately, add a few more lots, like 23 Mechanic. I know the conversation's way beyond this, but 23 Mechanic in the lot to the north of it. And then you give the developer the opportunity to buy and assemble more little lots.
Which we,
I know.
I understand that. However, we've heard from the neighbors, they do not want to expand the boundaries, so I don't think that as of right now that should sort of be part of the discussion.
Yeah, no, I just think if I lived there and I was surrounded by commercial space and didn't have the opportunity to capitalize on it, it'd be a shame.
But then the problem is, then that person would capitalize on it, and then the next person across the street will, and then the next one will, because the
Well, the
same
street
thinking
acts
will
like a
be-
buffer, kind of. The street is a nice break. Mechanic Street would be a nice break.
So I think we can put a pin in this, but I think we will just need to sort of, because we sort of moved on
I know,
when we
but-
left off with the sort of the mapping and never finalized those. And
I would like to go through the zoning at another meeting, if we can
I would
get
too,
Josh to come back, because I think there were a couple of things I just thought that I'd like to talk about that I've highlighted here, but I really appreciate the memorandum with the explanations.
Commentary is great.
Yeah, and I also really appreciate the last section of it, sort of for potential future, and so just noting the things that we've talked about, that, you know, some of what I've raised tonight about whether we're going to see some redevelopment, because whether, you know, these restrictions, or however you want to call it, you know, are a little bit too limiting. So I appreciate that you've documented all of that, because it was a lot of the discussion.
Right.
And, you know, it'll be in the record going down the road. And even as we get to places like town meeting, if this is brought, I wanted to ask what the board's thought about bringing this to town meeting. And then, Josh, I think also in Milton Village, you may have done a build-out analysis to see how much square footage and how many units might result from the zoning. And then we use that to kind of determine what an estimate of potential new revenue might be, tax revenue might be. Have you given any thought to whether that makes sense here, and what that might take from your end in terms of a scope and a fee?
And to follow
Yeah,
up
but
on
haven't-
that, sorry, if we're going to do an analysis on tax revenue, would we do an analysis on the amount of expected cars that would come to the neighborhood, and or how much more the traffic would be increased by adding more housing units?
sorry, Josh, go ahead. You were just gonna.
Yeah, no, I think both, like you could do a build out analysis of the zoning, and that could be used to both estimate financial sort of outcomes relative to the town tax base, and also used to plug into some of the town traffic analysis and future planning there. So I think it's potentially useful. I would say you probably, not to belabor 3A, but I feel like the experience we've had through 3A is that when we assign a potential build out capacity to zoning, that it's not always productive or helpful. And that oftentimes, as we're all experiencing through that process, it is significantly overestimating what will probably actually occur in reality. So I think that's the downside potentially, is that a number of potential units would be identified. Whether or not that number is actually realized in built form, I think is another question. Of course, when we do those build out analyses, we don't assume that every parcel is going to be redeveloped. That's often we do a pretty straightforward analysis comparing the current improvements on the land, the buildings, outbuildings, site improvements, et cetera, to the value of the land itself as a measure of which properties are more or less likely to have redevelopment pressure. And that is, not, I would say, generally when you do that look, and I think we probably have done that already in East Milton Square, I just don't have it in front of me, it's less than half of the properties kind of fall in the category of having the land be more valuable than the improvements themselves, which to us indicates that there might be potential for redevelopment there. So all that's a long way of saying, yes, it's all possible. It could potentially be useful, but just caution that there are potentially some downsides to it as well.
Great.
So, there's a lot of talk of late about a potential for an operational override. And, some people think that new development and commercial tax revenue is one way to help with that. And so I'm just anticipating we might get a question about that as we go forward, whether, especially if we do the economic development plan, is there potential for new growth? Is there potential for new revenue coming out of this zoning? Mm-hmm. So, I guess you could say yes. If you don't go through the analysis, I get your point, Josh, completely about the build-out analysis. It requires to take a lot of assumptions on which parcels could get developed and what the program might be for those parcels.
But if we're making it more attractive and easier, I think the likelihood is greater that they will be redeveloped.
Yeah, so the question for Josh would be, we would have to maybe give him some suggested ones to test out. I think in Milton Village you did a handful, I think pretty much along Adams Street. I don't think you did any up on High Street. But they seemed ripe, like the Citizens Kiosk in Milton Village, like the Citizens Kiosk in East Milton. You'd be able to kind of test that out.
I think that's something we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's what we should do, but I think we should be prepared about what the questions might be and might come if we continue to move forward with it.
I would think the fire department building might be one of the first ones, since the town has already issued a request for
interest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be the cornerstone of the whole square. I am concerned a little bit of some, I asked about the Santander Bank because I tuned into the sign review committee meeting. And I was a little concerned about some of the materials they were using. It's not the most attractive building to begin with, but I think they were, and I forget the name of the material. It was a more modern looking material. And they had said that bank was not in the historic railway village,
Right,
but the neighbors were, consider it part of the railway village. So they were a little, put off a little bit that it wasn't being recognized as that. So even though some of the buildings are not historically significant, I think the residents of East Milton have a vision for the square that has a little bit more of a nod to, a historic village. They don't want to be overlooked and all of a sudden become like a mini seaport area.
So that's a good segue to actually, Cheyenne, are you seeing any hands up, anyone on Zoom who would like to speak to this?
We have one person called iPhone. I'm going to promote them.
Great.
Hi, it's Joe Curran from Grafton Ave. How are you guys tonight?
Good,
Joe.
Hey, so just a couple of things in listening to this, and again, there was a lot said, so just bear with me if you don't mind. I want to make sure that we are going to have some more community meetings before we go to town meeting, and I would think the community meetings would come first and the town meeting would come second. I don't know how that works with your milestones and your schedule, but I just wanted to say that. And then, when we talk about the historic architecture of the buildings, while you guys were talking, I went onto the GIS mapping software for the town, and I'll just say, and I'll try to make this quick, but Novara, Stella's, Citizens Bank, Santander, Duncan, Hollow, the former decorating den, the travel office that's now a dentist office, are all pre-1940. They were all built, it looks like, after 1950, with the exception of 400 Granite Ave, which is, I think, a law firm, and I think at one time it was Fred the hairstylist. So there's a lot of buildings that are developable in that district, and I'll let you guys do the research and verify what I'm saying. And then when we talk about historic buildings, there are a lot of historic buildings there. Thankfully, we don't have any brutalist style buildings, but I do consider the post office and the former Baptist church and the library and the juvenile law firm building all to be pretty historic, and they're not as old as Lower Mills, but again, as I've said in the meetings I've been to, the East Milton district is much different than Lower Mills, right? Lower Mills is a transformed industrial district, and East Milton, I don't think was really ever, I guess the trains, because they put granite through there or whatever, it was kind of, but it was a different kind of manufacturing use. So, and then, we have pocket parks there now, which I know we talk about all the time. I've listened to all these meetings. You may not like the location of the deck park, but it's utilized. They use it for lots of things. And as you said, the library area, although it's, it is a green space and they do use it in that way. And then I know you were asking about the materials on the Santander Bank. I also went to the same meeting. And it was ACM, and and Cheryl, I'm sure, is familiar with this, or one of the members, I should say. It's aluminum cladding materials, and that's a pretty standard practice in the Santander kind of stuff. So that's basically all I wanted to say. I do feel there's a lot of buildings that can be redeveloped, and I think you've done a good job preserving the ones that are there.
Could you please give your address for the record?
Yeah, it's Grafton Ave.
What number?
Thank you.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Do I have to give the number? I prefer not to, but it's number 30.
We won't.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, number 30, Grafton.
I didn't quite understand the material when you said the material for the Santander, and you said that I might be familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. ACM, aluminum cladding materials. It's basically, two pieces of aluminum with a substrate in between, and it's you see it a lot in car dealerships and other places. They use it to bend. It's about a quarter of an inch thick, and they bend it.
Oh, so like in the Luco bond or something like that?
Yeah, sorry. Luco bond is probably a good example. Yeah, I think ACM is the generic version of it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I didn't see the proposal for that, so I'm not knowledgeable about what they're suggesting there. But commercial properties and large institutions might develop some standards that they want to apply, like we heard from the Gardner School, that they just becomes the corporate standard. I don't know if that's the case there or not, but
Yeah,
it's a durable
that's what
material,
they
that's
did.
for sure.
So that's what they did talk about. It was their branding.
Yeah.
And I did speak in full disclosure about it. And I said, what I feel like is getting overlooked, because I sort of thought about the school, was the branding of Milton. Milton's brand is not being recognized. And if, you look in the master plan, one of the first few paragraphs is we want to preserve the character and historic look of the town. And I think, and I forget what the little tagline of the master plan, it's really clever and I like it a lot. It's like planning for,
It's just probably preserving our past and planning our future.
Yes,
like that.
yes. And so it's, so I feel like that bank is, and again, or East Milton as a whole, we want to preserve what's good about it and plan for the future, but not go so far off that we're getting away from a kind of a village feel.
One thing I'll say is one who I do appreciate historic architecture. I've traveled a lot to historic cities and have seen where architects have been quite successful designing new buildings and that don't replicate the historic buildings but fit in. And I just want to make sure that we keep that opportunity here too, that we're not dictating something that's becomes a little pastiche. You know?
No, and I love that look too, but sometimes I feel like it can be a big miss. You know, I like having newer buildings as long as it's giving a nod to the past. But
So sometimes it's materials that are used, sometimes
Yeah.
it's proportion, scale, so forth. One thing I'd say too, there aren't too many, I'd say, corporations like a Santander that want something that's a high maintenance material, like a cedar siding, for example, that you might have found in a historic New England commercial building. It's just the maintenance on those things, the durability, and depending upon other things now, the fire codes for flammability or fire resistance of exterior materials, depending upon how close they are to other buildings. What you could do 100 years ago or 200 years ago, you can't do today, in today's code. So we just have to,
I think we can work. Obviously we work with the branding. I drove through Andover Center. You see Rock Point Trust. They don't have internally lit signs. They have gooseneck. They have a very tasteful. It's understated. I just drove, another area down on the Cape. They have a Dunkin' Donut, which has gooseneck lighting. They have a very simple signage, and it's on a shingle-style building. I think we can achieve both. We can give the branding. We can give, support redevelopment. But I think all of this is just helpful to say, this is what we're wanting it to look like. So,
and I think
make it easier for yourselves.
You just mentioned a couple of communities. I've spent almost 40 years working throughout New England. There are a lot of towns that will not allow the image programs that, national brands want. And the point that you make, I think, it's a very good point. We don't have to. You don't have to acquiesce. There are plenty of towns, you'll drive through plenty of towns where you will see that the town's acquiesced to an image program that a brand or a national program wanted. In some cases, it's a mistake, to do so.
It's what sets Milton apart and distinguishes Milton, from other communities. You feel like you leave the city.
Agreed.
You're coming into a historic suburb of Boston.
And there were plenty.
And it's hard to hold on to that. And there's towns that have dramatically changed. And I have to say, it's property values there's a direct correlation between the towns that are a little bit more. Have a little bit more criteria and ask for a little bit more versus those who don't.
And when you're in those business districts, in those towns that have had a more strict criteria, it is much more aesthetically pleasing to be there. We all enjoy those communities. You go into those towns and you enjoy being there. It just feels like a more enjoyable space to be in. So
maybe one of the things that as I look through this again is maybe some of the examples that we can find can also be kind of a more contemporary interpretation instead of all being historic, just to kind of show that there are ways to do it. There's a couple in here. So Josh,
Josh had a few in there.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something just to, I know this is a complete package, and maybe we can look at the language a little bit further just to say that we're not discouraging. I know when I've looked in Boston, where my office has done a lot of our work, they don't want to discourage a contemporary interpretation. So they'll go through a whole list of things in their guidelines, but they want to make sure that they leave that opportunity there. So maybe that we can think about a little bit of language like that, Josh. And I just have to go back, and look through and see where that might make sense. But maybe you can think about that too, because this is, your work product. So
Yeah, I can look for places where the current language might be implying that discouragement of contemporary, and just kind of make sure that it's more neutral if that does exist.
I mean, it can not be changing some of this, but just say it's like this, adding something that says these guidelines are, not intended to discourage a contemporary interpretation that would be respectful of the historic character or characteristics.
And maybe finding a couple examples.
Couple examples, yeah.
Well, we're going to have 440 granite soon enough, right? Not before town meeting, but.
Yeah, that'll probably be a while before we see
I
some
think
good
that's what
facade
we
photos.
are not encouraging.
Exactly.
So,
Well-
all right, I think this has been great. I think I would like to move on to the site plan review, which is also something that I think all of this is sort of very timely, that this is coming together with our site plan review, that all of this will be complementary work.
All right, so can I, before we do that, just one quick thing. I found it where I was reading before. It's on page 8 of the guidelines at the architectural styles. And it says 28% of the buildings were built prior to 1920 and 27 between 1921 and 1950. It would be better to have that be 1940, and so that we know how many buildings are subject to this kind of historic consideration.
Oh, I see. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And then one other quick thing, just because it caught my eye, on page 6, in the third column, East Milton Square has been home to drugstores. That's probably some language that might be pharmacy or something else versus drugstore. I don't know, just kind of
A pharmacy.
local
Sounds good.
services.
We can change that to pharmacy.
It just,
I think its sign might have actually said drugstore back historically, but we can change it to pharmacy.
I know.
Share a drug.
Yeah.
Store doesn't bother me.
We can recreate history if we want.
Yeah.
But it is what it was called.
Of selling drugs like you don't want sold.
Oh, I know. Well, let me tell you, there was a period, there were a lot of illuminated signs, and it was it was a little honky tonk. We're looking at, I think we're making improvements, so that's
all right, that's it for now.
great. Okay.
It also include a car dealership. I don't think we mentioned that. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, Josh, thank you. And can we look at a date? Maybe the first meeting in January?
Yeah, so back to Joe Curran's point.
Oh, yeah.
Are we planning on having another community meeting? Because I do think
Yes.
at the Art Center, that was a really good turnout.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to do a follow-up.
Yeah, I think once we'll have a final work that will, Josh, to present and do another forum. You did a great job with that at the.
But should it be a final one? Because what if there's input?
No, I mean where we have landed,
Okay.
and then give
An
time for an opportunity and
Okay.
input if there's anything.
So the question is, do they have scope in their contract? Do you have additional time in your contract, Josh? Have you expended it?
We are close. I'd have to look back at the contract or the proposal language in terms of a third forum or not. It might not actually clarify that, to be honest. But I can look back at the language. We still have some budget remaining, but it is nearing the end. It's not that big of a deal, but the contract extension that we did was through November 30th. So if we want to move those, keep those final monies that are available beyond the 30th, we'll have to do another contract extension, which is a simple thing to do, but we just have to go through that administratively.
With Cheyenne then?
Yeah. So because we do have funds still, some funds available, but we've not spent any of our planning board budget so far. So I think we had talked about with Tim for the May town meeting.
Actually, I'm curious if we have spent some on UTIL on the areas that were not the 25% because we couldn't use grant funds for that portion of their work. So the commuter rail calculations, et cetera. So it would just be good to clarify if we're.
Yeah, and I have UTL's contract, but Tim, we just met and talked, said we had not used planning board funds.
Okay.
But Cheyenne, we can just touch base on that too.
Okay.
So.
Yes.
Okay.
So January meeting with us or January public meeting?
I think January would be. I think we need to go through and have a discussion first ourselves to go through what the actual zoning language is. It'll give everybody a chance to sort of look at that.
Okay, so January with us and then a forum after?
I think so. I think January with us, so we all can make sure that we're satisfied with what we have here before we have a public forum.
That's what.
So we should probably extend Josh's contract out to February, the end of
In
February.
February then, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll need to do that. So yeah, because this has been great work and we'd like to see this continue. So that would be our meeting, then January 9th.
Can we, actually,
set one?
Is that
I'm going to be away some of January.
okay?
My daughter's graduation
Okay.
out of the country.
Yeah.
So I'll be gone, leaving on the 7th and returning on the 19th. So I will miss the 9th, but be back for the 23rd, in time for the 23rd.
Okay. So you leave. I'm sorry.
The 7th and return the 19th.
And I just think the 2nd would be
Too close.
Yeah.
too close. We could meet. I mean, I don't know if Monday the 6th. It's a Monday meeting.
Works for me, if that works.
And then we
if
could
that
at least
works
get a
for
meeting
others.
in when you were.
I think it'd be better that you're here for it because
Yeah.
that's when we're bringing Josh back.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'd rather make sure we get here for the 6th so Cheryl can be a part of that.
Okay. Are you available on the 6th, Josh?
I am, yes.
All right, if you could sort of put that date down and we'll
Cool.
be able to go through the zoning language on that date. And
Sounds great.
okay, great. Thank you so much. This was great presentation.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you,
Well
Josh.
done. Good job.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
All right, we'll see you on the 6th.
Sounds good.
Okay. So now let's move on to our the ADU. Actually, you know what? Would you all mind if we moved up the site plan approval bylaw and do that first? Because I felt like we were sort of getting close to wrapping that up. He's here for the MBTA.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be last. So he's going to
That's
stay
last,
here all
yeah.
night.
Unless we want to move.
I don't know. I just feel bad having him stay here all night. That's all.
We can either move. We can.
What did you have in mind for that discussion? Because I thought we were doing that at the
Yeah,
next meeting.
We are going to
Yeah,
do that.
okay.
This was just on to discuss. You had requested wanting to talk about the substitute districts at the next meeting, so I just wanted to check in on that.
Okay.
And it's
That was
probably,
really- but
I was
not
gonna say,
discussing
it's-
it tonight,
It's
but-
probably a good thing just to have on at all our meetings.
True.
Just in
True.
case
Yeah,
something
yeah.
comes up.
Yeah.
So we might
yeah,
not.
sorry,
Yeah, we might
maybe-
not need to spend a lot of
So
time.
do you want to move up just that quick,
Sure.
just brief MBTA, and then we can let Mr. Doherty speak
Yeah,
to us
I
on
think that's a
that.
great idea.
Okay.
Unless he's got some input on site plan approval.
Okay, so Tom, we're going to move up this discussion of the MBTA zoning to this time, since you're.
One thing I would caution,
wanna keep-
though, in case anybody else who's watching or planning
yeah.
to tune in and thinking it's going to be the last thing we discuss, I think
We can, we certainly would
we could
welcome
come
them
back
to discuss.
it. We
Yeah.
should offer that later in the
Yeah,
meeting.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so if you'd like to join us to, yeah.
Hi, Tom Doherty.
Yeah, and pull that microphone forward there.
Hi.
Good evening.
Tom Doherty, 247 Adams Street. Thank you for letting me address you. I just have two things to talk about that are recent and I think interesting. And they are, for example, yesterday afternoon, the governor signed into law the 5100 bill. And that, I think, is significant. It's an economic development bill, but it has in it a new type of MBTA Communities Act non-compliance penalty provision. And so that, I think, needs, just some thought, and I want to go through that.
Can you tell me, that's a lot of pages in that bill. Can you tell me where that is? I didn't make my way all the way through it.
Well, for example, yeah, I'm going to get there.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And then very briefly, on the 18th, Duxbury, voted against the MBTA Communities Act. And just I want to touch on that briefly to contrast that just for a minute with what, Milton's situation is. So, okay. I think the key point here is that some Milton residents may have voted to reject the MBTA Communities Act application to Milton based on their assessment that Milton should instead accept the stated penalties in the MBTA Communities Act. Maybe other people voted for different reasons, but that might have been one of them. And there, I think that's obviously the items specified there, and there are 4, are specific. And those Section B items are the only penalties stated in the statute. And therefore, the HLC itself and the AG cannot unilaterally add other penalties and or other funding exclusions. That's, as we know, a powerful legal principle, and that is what one of the things that was argued to the SJC, and it's pending. Only the legislature can add MBTA Communities Act penalties or otherwise amend the statute. However, at the EOHLC's initiative, the legislature has now added additional penalties for noncompliance to the MBTA Communities Act. And it could do the same thing in the same way again. So I want to just touch on that because that needs to be taken into account in terms of assessing where we are. So the Economic Development Bill signed by the Governor Healy yesterday includes new provisions that make specified state grant programs funding dependent upon a community being in compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. Now, you remember that Milton challenged, as did Bill Driscoll, the Seaport, $140,800 Seaport exclusion as not within, and it isn't, within the 4 items in the statute. Well, in this bill 5100 that was signed into law yesterday, if you go to House Bill 5100, Section 2, Executive Office Economic Development, subsection 7002-1352, it is for a grant program for coastal communities. And what this is funding shall be used for community planning and investment activities that stimulate economic development. And I'm skipping some, and to construct, improve, repair, maintain, and project coastal assets that are vital to achieving those goals. And it goes on, and then it has at the end this provision, as there is elsewhere as well, provided further that grants or other financial assistance in this item shall only be awarded to projects within municipalities that have been deemed in compliance or interim compliance with the multifamily zoning requirement in Section 3A of Chapter 48 of the general laws. $100 million, and it's excluded by this provision. If you go then to Section 7002-8044, that's a grant program for Mass Development Finance Agency. That's for a program administered by the Mass Development Finance Agency for site assembly, site assessment, permitting, and other pre-development and marketing activities to enhance the site's readiness for commercial, industrial, mixed use. And then it goes on, revitalization of downtown centers, and then it has the same sentence. Provided further that grants or other financial assistance in this item only be awarded to projects within municipalities that have been deemed or in compliance or interim compliance with the multifamily zoning requirement in Section 3A of Chapter 48 of the general laws. That's $3 million. The concern here is that let me go back a step, the Milton has a very good relationship, and I'll come to it, I'm sure, with with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Now, among the many guideline elements of purported preclusion, they have 13, right? The two I've just mentioned are two within that 13. Now, also within the 13 is MassWorks infrastructure and local economic development grants. We just talked about local economic development grants. Any of the others of those, at any time, they could add that same paragraph to the extent that they already haven't added it so far with regard to Seaport and with regard to the other funding. So one concern is that this isn't about, say, the town's good relationship with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. This was introduced at the end in conference by the governor, Governor Healy, as a way then at that point to add these particular elements to the statute. Think about it, at that point, and I probably don't have all of the examples, but at that point, Boston is itself exempt from the MBTA Communities Act, right? The Cape and Islands, right, are not addressed by it. Western Massachusetts is not addressed by it. All of the compliant, for whatever reason they chose to be compliant municipalities, right? All of those have no reason at the point that this is coming into the conference, and their legislators don't have any particular reason to object to this added paragraph. What this is a way to try to address, at least from now on, for example, that objection that was made for the $140,800. Now I still think a valid objection at the time because it wasn't legislated. But it's a developing dynamic that really, I think, changes things and also shows that the governor's got the ability to kind of, appropriately or otherwise, to insert this kind of a provision as an additional method of protecting their initiative. With regard to, there's one more point though, with regard to the, I won't take any more of your time, but there's one more point with regard to the, the MassWorks infrastructure program. It's in the statute, right? And one of the concerns I have about it is that, unlike so many of the other provisions, that one has a phrase in it that's not helpful. So the MassWorks infrastructure program, which is in the multifamily zoning statute referenced, It could affect funding infrastructure elements of public school improvements or new public school developments, because the Mass Works Infrastructure Statute, Chapter 23A, Section 63 of the Mass General Laws, expressly covers projects, including but not limited to certain specified projects. It's that phrase, including but not limited to, and when you think about infrastructure and you were to look at what is public infrastructure, it starts with actually the town hall and public schools, and then it goes through the whole litany of aspects in which there are, whether it's the roads, et cetera. So there are a couple of dynamics there that I think just need to be paid attention to, because the penalties will potentially increase over those which already are specified in the statute. And I think, you know, that's what I have to, notwithstanding the good relationship that the town has with, say, for example, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. This isn't coming from them. This is coming for, or otherwise, the Seaport Group. This is coming from the executive office. Lastly, I thought it was interesting that Duxbury voters rejected, I think it was 793 to 81 votes. They rejected the application to them. Now, that's interesting because the nearest MBTA, whether it's a subway or a commuter rail or, you know, a ferry terminal or a bus station, the nearest of any of those, and there's only one, and it's south of the Duxbury southern border. It's in Kingston. So you drive down or somehow get down about a mile and a half, and then turn around and take some MBTA-related commuter rail station back to Boston. The zoning guidelines require them to have 750 family units simply because that's the arbitrary, without statutory authorization, that's the arbitrary minimum. The reason I mention it is, you know, they don't even have the alternative which Milton has, which is just hypothetically assume that Milton had a subway station and Milton also had proximity to commuter rail station. The literal words of the statute says at least one, one
district of reasonable size.
Reasonable size, right? And it has or. So consequently, in addition to the fact that there is no subway station and it's 0.95 miles over to Ashmont, even if somehow or other that were applicable, which it's not, the fact that Milton does have proximity to commuter rail stations and can construct a zoning applicable to that is itself, I think, dispositive in the sense that the argument about whether or not something with regard to a subway station should be applicable to Milton in some way is moot, because the fact of the matter is, should Milton choose to follow the commuter rail station analysis and proceed in that regard, that ends the analysis. So that's all I have. I just thought it was interesting that the EOHLC was able, and the governor were able to add that new type of inserted penalty methodology.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you used the word insert. I would call it extort.
Or blackmail.
It's blackmail. And I think it's really unfortunate, and I've lost an incredible amount of respect for Governor Healy over this. She should have let the process play out. She should not have inserted herself. And I think it's a disgrace. And she should be embarrassed by it. And our legislators should be embarrassed by it too. Not just Milton's, but all the impacted towns. They should have waited. And they're not respecting the judicial process. And that is just disgraceful. So it's just unfortunate. And I don't know what to say. It's just, I'm extremely let down by all of our government officials, from our local senators and representatives. Going back when this started years ago, I requested both our senator and representative to come to our planning board meetings, and they refused to. I asked them multiple times, I wanted to know why they voted for this, why this plan was good for Milton, and neither one of them, none of them came. So this process has been so disappointing to me personally, and I'm all about retaining local control, and the governor has just overstepped that. And I think it's just unfortunate, and I'm just disappointed.
Tom, as someone who has as much experience and success doing what you have done, how would the SJC potentially look at what just happened with legislation being packed into that economic bill to try to reinforce the initiative?
Look, I've done a lot of cases in front of the SJC, including this, I believe, the single most important commercial case, the EMC case. I think at this point, what they would do is to say, well, wait a minute, we'll deal with the matters and the arguments that are in front of us. If you know, the problem I think that for Milton is that there are many ways and reasons in which a governor or even a particular municipality might influence the outcome of a legislative initiative, right? Trading this for that. And I don't think that the SJC would want to necessarily engage in that. They'd say, look, let's look at what we've got in front of us. Let's try to assess that. But that's about as much as I would have to say on that. I think they'd be looking at, look, this is the record we've got. We take it one step at a time. If you're going to come back and say that somehow someone was misled in how they voted, my take on it was all of those towns that are unaffected and cities, and all of those, including Boston alone, right, and all of the those that have complied, it isn't a big deal for them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get the and if they're willing to vote in favor of it, advertently or inadvertently, even advertently saying, well, you know, I've done something for the governor, maybe for my municipality, I'll get something in return.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't think, to say it in one sentence, I don't think the SJC would get involved in any of that at all unless there was some unusual, unusual aspect that I don't see.
So you don't think it would change their judgment? You know, it seems like the governor is trying to tighten the headlock that she prefers to have over these 177 communities. And if you're the SJC and you look at that, you know, does it influence them? I understand the case before them is the case before them. That legislation has nothing to do with it. But just in terms of how they might look at it, would they feel for the 177 communities that the governor
that's
is?
a good way to. That's a good way to approach it. Let me just turn that a little bit. We already know that. There are so many aspects of the guidelines that are outside the literal wording of the statute, right? So there's something going on with regard to the way the EOHLC is trying to, in effect, expand a number of aspects of a statute that is rather focused. this is a sort of reaction by the governor, perhaps, to the appropriate assertion that many things here in the guidelines are outside the focus of the statute, and to try to deal with that, but sort of on a piecemeal basis by adapting as to one or the other. So maybe it is, certainly it is at a minimum, a strong indication that the EOHLC is aware, very aware of the weaknesses in the guidelines, and trying to address it. Having said that, they address it through the legislature, right? So that is
well. Unfortunately, all communities, there's as many communities that are not affected by this legislation as there are communities that are, right? 177 are. That means that there's probably about another 100. There's 351 in the state, I think, right? So, those others that aren't, they have no horse in the race.
Right.
So unfortunately, the economic bills and how our legislature works is really, it's not necessarily beneficial to all the communities within it. There's a lot of horse trading that goes on, and there's an awful lot of legislation that gets passed with deal making.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the legislature.
Yeah, well, these particular mass economic bills are not necessarily good.
Now, and couldn't our representatives ask to take this portion somehow out of the giant economic bill and deal with it separately and give it an actual true discussion? How come it, to me, it just gets buried? And that is so disappointing, and it's done purposefully. And I'm disappointed in our representatives that they didn't speak up, knowing that we were in the middle of this and we've been waiting. Why didn't they speak up on our behalf and say, you know what, let's take this out of the giant economic bill?
Okay,
and deal with it separately.
Let me go back a step, though, because it was, for example, Bill Driscoll was the one who wrote the letter with regard to the $140,800, and he also, I may be wrong, but I believe that he voted against in this. This was at the last moment. It was done in a, in the conference, right? And I believe he voted against that. So it's one vote, that's as much as I.
And if the selectmen at the time, looking back, if we challenged the classification like you had wanted to, and you did all that work, on behalf of the town, we would have maybe not have been in this position. It was a missed opportunity, and that we're dealing with it now. I'm always one to try and do everything we can.
Yeah.
And then I don't like to live with regrets. And I feel like that's a regret that the town has to live with, which is unfortunate.
Right. I would say that within your own expertise, there is, I'm not trying to repeat myself, but there is the ability to take the commuter rail station, and even within the guidelines that then says, you have the flexibility to take 50% of what you otherwise would have had. I think in my math it was 548, but if that other acre it'd be 565, somewhere in there in terms of the number of multifamily zoning units, and only half of that would need to be within the half-mile radius. So at least with respect to trying to minimize, it assumes that some degree of multifamily zoning increment is desirable, and if not, that's stopped. But if it were, you have at least the ability, which towns like Duxbury don't have. They're still 750. That's it. And the irony is that your amount, if I'm right on the let's call it 550 or so, that's less than 750. So you challenge them on that too, and say, hey, we comply with the statutes. You go away. The guideline is incorrect in all respects, and as to us, the 750 doesn't apply. All right, I'll stop there.
Yeah, and it is interesting now because now we're going to talk about ADUs. So now all of a sudden, if we have to do all this housing, then all of those units, the 568 units, are an additional potential of another 568 ADUs as by right. So Milton has 9,000 housing units. So overnight, because of the ADU, it's another 9,000 potentially ADUs. So it's a lot of zoning in a very short amount of time. And, planning should be thoughtful, and this is not a thoughtful process. And I still think that the governor and our legislature have done a huge disservice to all of us.
So, may I?
Yes.
In light of...
Is it a question for Tom? Because then we'll...
No, I just want to thank Tom and just let him know that we did receive an email from Tim Zawinski, which was a forward from the town administrator, so alerting the select board members and the planning board members about this bill. And I just want to let the viewing public know that the particular one, you highlighted a couple, but there's more.
Yeah.
And I calculate that they're worth over $1 billion. And they include the Seaport Economic Council, the Site Readiness Program, the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund, the Mass Tourism Destination Development Grant, Mass Works, which in and of itself is $400 million, the Underutilized Properties Program, the Mass Impact Grant Program, which is $252 million, the Mass Cultural Facilities Fund, Local Economic Development Grants, the Mass Board of Library Commissioners funding for library projects, the Mass Historical Commission's Historic Preservation Grant Program, and the Mass Development's Priority Development Site Program. And all of those have that language that you refer to, that you're not eligible if you're not compliant, deemed
Right.
compliant.
I have
right?
those same ones, and the only
Okay.
only two of those, the Mass Works Infrastructure Program and the Local Economic Grants, are among the 4 in the statute. So you've got 13 minus, you got 11 that are out of statute.
And some we knew about and some we didn't know about, right? About half of them
Yes,
we knew.
they said some were were added to the guidelines.
The original 13 that she piled
But
on.
not all of these. And, I just want to take exception to saying she and the governor, this and that. The legislature, this is their bill. She signed the bill. However it came, the juice that made it happen, in the end, they're the ones responsible. They're all.
Not for adding the
all
13 grants.
They're all responsible for having approved it. And I just, you can argue about how it got there, but they all signed, they all.
I'm not going to argue, I'm just
agreed
going to
to the bill.
disagree with
They
you.
voted.
The 13 weren't done by the legislature. The 13
Thank
were
you,
done
Tom.
They voted
by
it.
our governor.
They
I do
voted it.
have, I thought I had the governor's letter. I'll get it to you. The governor certainly took a lot of credit for the initiative.
Yeah.
And she has her 501c3, the one Commonwealth where no one knows where that funding's coming from. It's just, she's got a huge, and, I've been following the
This is
Duxbury.
not the agenda
Yeah.
of discussing MBTA communities, is
This is
to
not-
trash the governor. I'm sorry. I think we're out of line here.
I'm just saying that I think that
He's
the governor did play a significant part in this initiative, that's
Yes.
all. Yeah.
Agreed.
Great, thank you
All right.
so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
And so the reason why, again, we have this always on the agenda in the event that we do need to talk about something. Cheryl had emailed and asked if we could, there were the districts that we had narrowed down to when we last had our discussions on MBTA zoning. there were two that we had narrowed it down to that were going to be evaluated by UTIL. It was St. Pius, the site was St. Pius's, and it was a site at 711 Randolph Avenue. So we'd never heard the results of that.
Just one other piece to that, though. There was the analysis to take the Elliott Street and have it be 3 units and not 4 across the board.
Right.
That was part of the analysis,
That was part
too.
of it, too, yeah.
And what, sorry, I interrupted you, but what my request had been was just to schedule UTIL to come in to follow up on what we agreed to at that meeting, so that it wasn't just left hanging out there.
I'm fine with that, having them come back, because I was curious on how those districts would play out.
And I thought they were supposed to look at the Randolph Ave, right?
The Randolph Ave.
Yeah.
So I'm curious on how, because Tim made a comment that those seem less desirable, but I don't know what that base. I have no
He
sense
and
of.
Cheyenne decided that they were less desirable based on their scorecard analysis.
Tom, you had something else you wanted to.
I'm sorry, I did find a letter, and I only have one copy, but I'll hand it to you, and it does contain the sentence, "This legislation includes nearly all of the authorizations and transformative policy initiatives that I filed in March, bringing the total authorization to nearly $4 billion, et cetera." I'm just saying, I think you had some role in the initiation.
She's proud of it.
Yeah, well, yes, that's fine too. I'm not.
That's all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it. Okay.
So
that would be the December 12th meeting that we would invite UTIL to come and just present the findings on that.
Do you mind also,
No.
just for context too, like I had asked with the forum being canceled, was UTIL scheduled to come in? And I had emailed Meredith and Tim, and Meredith said, yes, she had planned for them to come in, but Tim said that they needed direction before coming in because with the stopping of the forum. But I said, that I thought that we had given them direction and we should see where that landed, and then we could decide what to do next.
Right.
So Tim thought that we should discuss that, right? And so that we could get back to
UTIL for what
UTIL about
what we would be asking them to come.
So the only concern that I have with that is, you had stated, that, Meredith, that one of the reasons not to have the forum is we don't want to cause anxiety to residents or certain neighborhoods in town. Do you think talking about this is going to cause anxiety?
I think we need to frame it that we've heard a number of times we should think of ourselves as commuter rail. And, one of those areas is commuter rail. And people need to understand what it really means. Like, it's easy to say, well, yeah, let's just do commuter rail. But what does it actually mean? Where is it? Because just like you start when you're in East Milton or when you're Elliott Street Quarter, once you start looking on a parcel basis, it changes the way people begin to think about it. So I don't think we're saying that we're proposing any of these, but what we're doing is responding to comments that we should look at other areas of town and we should look at commuter rail. And it's not that we're recommending anything yet, but at least we're doing the analysis. That's what I think about Randolph Ave. That's what I think about St. Pius. And that's what I think about Elliott Street. We all received an email from Pete Jackson concerned about increasing any of the unit capacity in the Elliott Street quarter. It's our responsibility to use the technical assistance to look at these things, I believe, and go to the public, which is why I felt their forum was important, is just to kind of bring them up to speed on what we're looking at and how these things are interrelated. If you take something here, and here are the things you have to look at. I think UTIL's best to explain that because the way especially Zoe, I find, explains it, it's understandable. Like if you, the land area calculations and so forth. So that's my thinking behind it. And I understand some people might get concerned, but people will get concerned.
And
they understand that this is not our
and the other concern
recommendation.
The other concern is, when anyone's in a lawsuit, unfortunately I've been in plenty, the advice from the attorney is always don't comment until the the judges have ruled. So that is my concern, that we are speaking when maybe we shouldn't be speaking about it. You know.
The law says, well, anyway.
Yeah. So that's my concern.
So
We're also pushing towards a 25% plan. My thought was that we were going to individually look at 7-Eleven Randolph, individually look at St. Pius, see what we can get out of those districts.
That was my thinking.
But that's
But
what you're
instead,
getting.
Excuse me, but we're not, because we're taking away from East Milton Square and we're adding on to Elliott Street and we're doing all this stuff, pushing towards a 25% compliant plan. So if we want to look individually at just Randolph Ave, that's great. But if we're going to cobble it into a 25% plan, I don't think we should be doing that right now.
So what we asked them to look at those parcels to see what it would take to make those as close to 15 units an acre. That's the law.
When you say those parcels, what do you mean?
Randolph Ave and St. Pius.
Right, does it stop there or does it?
We asked them to look at those as as close to 15 units an acre.
Or a
So
little
that
bit more, yeah.
we didn't ask them to look at any. If we choose to swap them out with something else, that's separate. But that
Doing that in our analysis and in our forum, it's like we're pushing towards a 25% plan from what I see.
so
That's a reason why I don't want to do it.
So the thing about in my view, the way we looked at those is it's easier to peel back from 25 to 10 or 15 than it is to start at 10 and then bump it up to 25.
So we're going to 25 is what you're saying, and then we're going to peel back.
Yeah, but no.
I think it's a little premature to be jumping into 25, personally.
Well, we have a consultant who's under contract. We asked him to look at certain things. I'm asking for the work product that we agreed to at a previous meeting to come back to us. And the fact that any of it is information to inform whether it's 10%, 15%, 25%. It's all information. It shows what you can fit on that particular site or that particular site. It's up to us to decide how we use that information. And if you think that you don't want to use it for 25% and the judge comes back and says that's what we have to be, you know, well, I think we are preparing ourselves for whichever situation the justices come back with. That's the way I view it. And if we don't do the analysis now, we're going to be behind. It'll take us longer to get there down the road. And I think it's cleaner if when we've asked them to do something is to have a work product that shows that particular piece of analysis instead of just halting it. And I just want to also comment that we haven't been advised, as far as I know, by town council in executive session or otherwise, or in open session, that we shouldn't be doing this. And so unless we get that advice, I don't see why we should be worried about that.
I 100% am worried about the Supreme Court looking at what we're doing and saying, oh, you know what, they're already working towards a 25% plan.
They're not looking at what we're doing.
Have we asked town council if it's okay or if we're disclosing
I haven't
anything,
asked town council.
Neither have I.
I haven't asked them.
I think, and I was going back and reading the minutes, I think the concern was creating a sense of anxiety unnecessarily with the residents is more of what my feeling was. So I think studying the districts for each district and what we can get out of those districts is more of the way I was looking at approaching it than setting forth with any particular specific plan at this time. So, you know, maybe Zoe can evaluate just those districts. Like you were saying, you would be curious to see how many units we could get, you know, as, you know, 15 units per acre, a little above. What does that look like?
I also don't want the Elliott Street quarter to sit on the books at the last presentation on the books and have Elliott Street neighbors worried that we're telling them 4 units and 4 units a parcel down to those.
So maybe they can present. Maybe what we would be asking is for you, Teal, to present that evaluation without having it be a 25% compliant plan. That's not what we need to look at each parcel individually until we know what the SJC is going to decide. We don't want a specific plan, but we want to be prepared for different options. But I'll leave it up to the board on if we want Util to come and if we want to ask specifically for that information. Because we did request it. They've done the work. Do we want to know, or do we want to just not?
Well, I do think, I think I want to know for sure. We asked them to do it. We want to see their work product. The question is just when.
So at our December meeting, we're going to be getting very close to when we're getting a decision back. I think if they present it at the December meeting, we have the information. We don't have the forum until we get the decision, but at least we're going to have, I think, Sean, you said at our last meeting, we're only so many options. We have a pretty good idea how we have to go. This piece of information, why wait until January for it? I mean, we can be thinking about it once we get it. We can be thinking about it as soon as we get that decision in. So I'd like to see it in December.
So even if worst case scenario, the SJC comes back and, says you guys have to do it, I think there's still a question out there that, does the town of Milton want to do it? A lot of people voted no. They want us to be non-compliant. I don't think we should assume that even with the addition of all the grants that just got passed, that the town of Milton and her residents are going to automatically want to comply.
So I'm just going to go back to the town of Milton voted to reject a particular piece of zoning. The town of Milton didn't vote to be non-compliant, because that's not the question that was put in the referendum.
Because for the referendum, you had to put the exact same language. So you're 100% right. They did vote on the exact same language that was passed at town meeting, because that's what was required to do. But a lot of people voted no because they didn't want anything.
Well, this board talked at length about wanting a better plan, was going to develop a better plan. Not that this board was never going to do a plan. So, I think it's our job to present, if we're required by the law, as the court will come back and tell us, it's just like I said before, it's our responsibility to present a plan, a zoning, compliant zoning, and then it's up to the town meeting to take a vote on it. And if the town meeting takes a vote that people now with more information, there were plenty of people who said they just didn't think the plan was fair because of East Milton. So if they think a plan is better, I don't think you can say that they would vote to say that we should, take ourselves out of the running for $1 billion in grant money and potentially affect schools like we heard tonight.
It's not $1 billion for Milton. Let's just be careful. To the listening audience, what Cheryl just said is not what's on the table for Milton.
Well, we definitely won't get $1 billion. That's the whole stage here.
The reality of it is there's no certainty of any of that funding. No certainty of it. And Tom said something earlier. We don't know, Tom said, some of the voters, who knows if it's 1 or 1,000 or 2,000. We have no idea why some people voted no. Some may have voted no, as Tom said, for simply the reason that they would prefer to accept the penalty because it's you opt in or you opt out. This is one of the cases, or this is part of the case that's been presented by our attorney. So we don't know. We have no idea what people's motivations were. We don't know people's motivations that voted yes. So, and certainly so much time has passed. There's so much more information out there to those that have paid attention. Many people are paying attention to even Duxbury now, in Duxbury voting no. So I think for those that have decided to pay attention, the actions of other communities is informing a Milton resident or a Milton voter better than back when they voted. I stand by what I said the last time when we discussed this in the meeting. I think it's going to create excitement for some if they feel like their community or the area of the community is being relieved, and anxiety for others if others feel that they are going to be burdened by the zoning that we discuss. We don't know what the SJC is going to do, whether they're going to make a decision before the end of the year or not. If, I don't have an issue if this is something that gets discussed in December. Unfortunately, the latter part of the year in December is not the best time in terms of getting people to pay attention to the planning
Maybe
board
that's
meetings.
better in terms of anxiety.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But people get busier in December, so it's not when we can attract the biggest audience. I'm not sure what month of the year we can attract the biggest audience, but
I think it's this is more for us than for the audience, really, for now, until we do the forum.
yeah. So I'm fine if we do it in December. I am.
I mean, one thing I will say is that we will come into compliance depending on what the Supreme Judicial Court rules. I'm expecting to do what they say. It wouldn't hurt to listen to UTL. I just don't want to push towards a 25% plan. I don't think that that's right. I just think we should look at all the districts individually, sort of that's our ammo, and then when we get our decision from the Supreme Judicial Court, we cobble together our plan, 10%, 25, maybe it's an adjacent community, I have no idea. Well, it should be 10%, but I don't know, but I just can't say enough, I don't want to tip our hand to the Supreme Court. I think they need to be, they're already, I'm sure, listening to everything, and they're not, the fear is that they're not going to be objective as we say, oh, we've got a 25% plan. I just think it's a bad idea. But I guess, I would be not opposed to doing something in December and then waiting. Meaning having UTL come in, listening to UTL and then waiting.
So do you and Cheyenne want to just talk with UTL and see what they think, that based on that prior meeting and this discussion, what they think they can present to us? Just okay.
Let's do that. Cheyenne, is that all right? We'll have a call, and maybe talk to UTL and say, without developing a particular plan, can we evaluate those, look at those districts and what they found?
Yes, we actually have a closeout meeting. So Tim and I tomorrow morning, so we can bring that back to them.
I think given that, I'm just going to make this request, given that we were close to looking at how this could work as a 25% plan, but with alternative districts, can we just see if these work that way? So we will have the answer.
So that's a 25% plan.
Yeah, but but Jim, it's just analysis.
I would rather not. I'm one of five. I would say no, but you keep pushing it, so I don't know, put it to a vote. I don't know what to say.
It's part of what we had asked them to do before. But what I'll say about the 10% is it's a whole conversation. Tim had told us, contrary, I think, to what Mr. Doherty said, that a commuter rail in an adjacent community is not tied to a half a mile. It can go anywhere.
Anything can go anywhere.
So we have these district scorecards, and we should look at Tim and Cheyenne they took a stab at it, and we should take a look at what they did, and Cheyenne can run through it with us, and we can see if we agree with them. Because in the end, we still have to have logic. We said that we spent a lot of time talking about criteria to make decisions, and any new district should be run through the same criteria. I think that's something that we could talk about at that meeting as well.
So I'm not necessarily wanting to talk about anything. However, you guys are. So I would be more inclined to, if there was going to be a discussion, looking at individual parcels. I think I've said this before, that possibly we agree on. I'm concerned about, all this density that's going to come very quickly. I do think it's going to happen fast. And I think some of the successful towns that I've been into, they've kept their density kind of on the outskirts of town. I don't want to see Elliott Street destroyed. And I think we should be looking, if we're going to look at something, look at Truman Parkway first, because that's closest to the commuter rail. And I think that's where we should start our discussion.
That was one thing we asked them about, if Truman Parkway could work. They had their doubts about it, but have they looked into it? Maybe they could look into it and find out.
So I'd concede to that.
And you folks eliminated sites last time, like the nursing home site, but
Nursing home site.
1200 Brushwood Road.
And 648 Canton, we got rid of too, right?
And there was other sites on Randolph Ave. I don't know, they'd seem to think they didn't want to have to look at all of them, so I think we narrowed it down. But maybe by narrowing it down, they have learned something from those that they could help us with on the others. So that's why I think it's useful to hear from them.
So if we had them look at the Truman Parkway,
And 711 Randolph Ave, where that 40B.
711 Randolph
St.
Ave.
Pius. They should have already looked at St. Pius.
But St.
and
Pius,
7-Eleven.
they would have information, and they would also have information on Elliott Street. Because I think they'll see that Elliott Street, like without even seeing it, I know that's, in my mind, would be really more dense than I would like to see on Elliott Street. But I haven't seen their, not as a, looking at each site.
I think looking at, Jim's point is looking at each site individually. And I think if we have to get there, we can get some sites, because I think it was said that, previously that we don't have a lot of options. And,
but when we say look at a site, we have to have, like, what are you trying to do on that site? Like, you two will say, well, what's the density you're trying to achieve on the site? Like, what's looking at it really mean?
Well, for example, 711 Randolph Ave, the way it stands now, I think it's 12 units per acre. So I would look at that site and say, okay, if there's 100 units being built right now, let's up the zoning a little bit to maybe 120 or 130 till you get to 15 or 16 units per acre. That's what I consider looking at that site. Right, that site is already being built. I mean, no matter what the scorecard tells me, I look at net new, dispersing the units around town. There are a few criteria that I look at that lead me to say 7-Eleven is a no-brainer. And one of the arguments was at 12 units per acre, we would have to add more somewhere else. Well, up it to 15 so you don't have to add more somewhere else. That's what I call looking at a site.
Yeah, so if we did 15 an acre.
There, stick with 7-Eleven.
And then, you're only going to do 15 an acre anywhere, then you have to take the Elliott Street out.
So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying looking at a site.
You're not going to.
That's an example of what I would look at for that site.
So to me, if you're going to do a commuter rail or adjacent community and your target by the law is 15 units an acre, what does that look like?
Well, our target is 15 because of the statute, not because of a 10% or 25%.
I understand. But if you're saying look at a site, what do you say? Is it 3 units an acre? Is it 5 units an acre? Is it 15? Is it 25? The only thing that if you're not going to use the design guidelines in any way to determine what your analysis is, then you got to go with the law, right? So that's 15 units an acre.
I'm not saying I'm not going to use them in any way. I'm saying that that I weigh certain criteria heavier than others. So we have our 45 criteria, and each criteria gets a value of 1. And this is something I missed. The light bulb went off a couple of weeks ago. I wish net new or proximity to the T or likelihood of being built were weighted heavier.
So I think this is
getting
something
diluted by 40
This is what I wanted.
Other criteria.
This is what I wanted to discuss at the forum, because it should be that the public.
Discuss it here. I mean,
the public needs to also weigh in on the criteria, because in the end, why is it the 5 of us decide what the most important criteria are? If for some people it's going to be different. And the other thing I want, there's been over close to 600 survey responses. I asked Tim and Cheyenne to send those to me, which I reviewed and had put some slides together for the forum. And there's data in there. You can talk about sample size, but there's data in there. And if you dig in, you can also see, which precincts people were, commenting from. And if you really dig in, you can see, how people were responding from certain precincts on certain questions. But we got a lot of comment that in the whole process of the yes, no, that a lot of people felt like they didn't know about it, like it happened, even though we said there were a lot of meetings and it was in the paper and everything. So,
They didn't know about the yes/no vote?
No, they didn't know about the details of the zoning. Like people,
sure. Yeah,
they were unaware of it until that time period, right? Like the law was on the books for a long time. We worked on it. We had lots of meetings. It was the front page of the Milton Times, but there were still people who didn't know about it. So, and there were questions about why these districts, why these locations, and so, having, sound reasons. I mean, other than it's a vacant parcel somewhere, it's much easier, I think, to justify when someone asks a question about, well, why is it this location, why that, why this density or that, is if you have a way to compare what your options are. And then you can see whether people agree with you by having a color-coded system in the public forum.
If you look at the scorecard and you total all the criteria up, every district gets a D or an F, right? So we're not picking great sites to begin with. That kind of bothered me as well.
No, we don't have what some communities have, or like empty
No, I understand.
parcels
So,
someplace.
at some point, we're going to have to make the decision, right? We're going to have to look at the.
So the question is, do we
make a
want Michelle to
recommendation.
come based on, because we have, it's 9:30 right now, and I really do want to get through the site plan approval. So that's already been, moved forward to the town council to start reviewing. So I just would love to sort of get to wrap that up for a little piece if we can, at least tonight. So we are going to pencil in UTL, see if they can do it. I'll talk to Cheyenne, see if they can do what we're requesting, with the understanding that we need to have an understanding of these sites without having this be necessarily driven by a certain plan at this point.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it should come from you.
Does that sound?
Fine with me.
Okay. All right, Cheyenne, so I'll touch base with you tomorrow on that.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Can I just ask what you said about what version's been sent to town council? Because
So Tim said he's sent sort of where we were on our site plan approval, just knowing that it's not a final draft, but that that sort of what we had language, he wanted them to just have an opportunity to start looking through to see if there was anything that stood out that would.
Yeah, I just was curious. Did it include a lot of the material that Maggie added at the end or not? Because I don't know that I had questions about some of that, so I'm just curious.
You know what? I don't think it did have
Maggie's version was under the redlined, and then we sent a clean copy and a redlined copy.
So that was sent to town council, Cheyenne?
Yes.
And if he crosses it all out.
Well, yeah, I reviewed it in the last couple of days, so I don't know if my questions and comments and additions were in what was sent, but.
Was this all from yours, Redline? Was that
We
all?
probably sent it either Friday or Monday, so if there's
Okay,
anything
so
after.
would not.
Okay, that's what I.
Okay. So Jim, yours and ours didn't make it in. Is it what you added and what I added didn't make it to what's in town council's yet, but that's okay, yeah.
We can discuss it here.
Yeah.
And it could be added, it could be sent again,
Yeah, this
like
is
an
not, this was,
updated. Okay, let me find
So
something.
Cheyenne, in the clean version, it does include Maggie's comments?
No, because last meeting, we didn't get to Maggie's stuff. We only cleaned up to what was actually discussed.
Okay. So,
oh, so I had it in
No,
this,
okay.
but, okay.
All right, so it's in what's in the folder now. What's in the folder now includes also things that I commented on and added, and Jim did. So maybe what we could do is have Cheyenne pull it up.
Yeah, that would be great, Cheyenne, if you could.
So I'm kind of thinking under purpose, we pulled some purpose things from various towns. I'd just be curious to see, we probably don't need this many things in here. And it's almost like somebody needs to take it and kind of incorporate it. And I don't know if that's town council or one of us or Cheyenne. You know, I'm just talking about purpose now because we kind of lumped a bunch of different towns kind of ideas in there, but there's some duplication and it just needs somebody to kind of
edit
it. Yeah, so I don't think we need to go through here. I just think somebody needs to do it. So
Is that town council's role? I mean, I would think maybe.
well, I actually don't know that they write zoning, you know, necessarily, but Cheyenne, I don't know how you feel. I don't want to add anything to you, but do you feel like this is something that you could do, or do you think it's better for one of us to do or town council to do?
I could go through and take out all of the duplicates, but I think it would also be beneficial to have a second set of eyes on that, just to make sure it's how you'd like it.
All right, so yeah, so I think if you would do that, that would be helpful, like under the purpose section, right?
Yep.
Cheyenne, can you scroll so we can see the entire purpose section on the screen? Okay, and it ends right there. Okay, that's the entire thing. It ends at authority, right?
Right.
Yep. I'm, you know, if you guys prefer to do things in this manner, I'd be happy to take the purpose section and do that. Cheyenne can do it as well, and then we'll have two. Or I could do it myself, and Cheyenne doesn't have to do it, just so I can get rid of the duplicity. So.
Okay.
That would be great, Sean. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sean.
And then you can review it too, Cheyenne, with him.
And then the authority seems like Tim put that. It seems like that seems okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
pretty straightforward.
we didn't have that in there, and I thought we should have something about the
Okay.
authority, and so.
I guess that's something like town council would want to look at,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
So then applicability.
So in these notes, we have highlighted,
Well, this is where we said we wanted to come back to also when I had that conversation about interior work, but, and then we were
so
discussing
the
whether mixed use should
excluding-
be a separate paragraph or not. So,
are you talking about in A? We're talking about.
yeah, so whether mixed use should be there or its own paragraph C.
I thought we agreed that it's okay to keep it there, rather than adding a different paragraph, but we could.
I mean,
I guess
do other towns, how do other towns? I didn't really look
You
at
know what
that.
Natick did, which was slick, was they did like a tier where they had a major site plan, minor site plan, exempt from site plan, and it had limited site plan, and then site plan review modification when you want to come back and change things. I mean, that seems like it would, I mean, it might be more work for us to define what a major site plan and a minor site plan is, but
I think that's what Tim thought it might be.
it would clean this up a lot. It would just make it easier for the end user, I think.
I just think that's going to be a total rewrite, but
Yeah, that seems like it's more, like, I think we could add that later at some point, but it might
Okay.
be.
I thought it was very,
Yeah, no,
you know, as a
I
guy coming to
understand.
before the board, I'd be like, this makes sense. Where do I fall in here? Just thinking of the end user, because this is very long and a lot of regulation for someone trying to do a development. And if we're talking about making things easier,
right, so maybe what we should do is get what we want for everything, and then we could peel back what we think for the smaller
what
things,
if we
like you
get what
don't
we
need.
want for everything and then give it to a guy and have him or a girl and have them edit it? Just like we did with East Milton Square. I mean, that was really smooth. What Josh did for us was great. On a smaller scale, can we do that here? Get a consultant to do it?
I think we want to have our real life experience, like what we go through on all of our projects that create problems that are vague,
Okay.
having, you know,
But, I mean, whether we want to have MAPC, take it and, you know, I don't know, maybe that's not a bad thing.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable making edits that would you could give to town council and be like, yeah, this is great, or tweak it a little bit. I mean,
But I think initially, like getting all of the ideas of what we think should be in here, and then maybe running it through somebody with expertise.
and then we come back and tweak it a
make
second
sense.
time or a third time.
I mean, I'm not, certainly, I would be fine with that.
We have the money, right? We should do that for
So-
ADU as well.
So let's continue running through like content-wise.
Sure.
And then, I mean, I agree with you, Jim, that for something small, like even when we were talking about if MBTA communities comes in and site plan review is going to refer, or MBTA communities will refer to this for site plan review. If you have a 3-unit building, that can maybe be treated differently. And if you have an interior renovation versus a 20,000 square feet or a 20-unit, but we're going to have to think those through
Yeah, because
a little bit more.
We're doing a 1,000 square foot barber shop. Do I have to do a traffic study? It's like,
Well, that's why I added those things at the last meeting about triggers for those.
I know.
But to your point, if you separated them out, you wouldn't have to necessarily have a trigger. But maybe the short term is to run through where we think we want these now. And is that what you're trying to do, Meredith?
Yeah, and so let's go back to just A, where we have no mixed use multifamily building, excluding 2-family residences. Then we would just be changing the language to no multifamily building, no multifamily. And taking out mixed use, is that the intention on
Well, I'm just thinking we want,
excluding 2 families? And wasn't that because of the ADUs? Because we want to, when an ADU comes, we want site plan approval.
Yeah, because we're not calling ADUs 2 families specifically for that reason, right? Because I was looking at the ADU bylaw language also, and we're not.
this language came from our old existing. So we should be thoughtful about what we might want it to be now. So it was saying that for a 2-family resident, you didn't need to go to site plan approval before, right? So this is saying that remains the same. But the ADU bylaw is going to say that you have to go for site plan approval, I think, the way we're thinking of it.
Yeah.
So why exclude the 2 families now, except that that's more red tape for a 2-family?
It's crazy. Then why include?
You can't even do a 2-family.
ADUs, I mean.
We have no zoning which allows,
Well, if we write
we do a little
ADUs the way we're writing this, 16 pages long, we shouldn't need site plan review.
Now, my question when we get to the ADUs is, why shouldn't we just refer to this for site plan review? That's what we said we were going to do with the MBTA communities. We shouldn't have it in
then you have to
separate
include 2
sections
families.
anymore. Then I think you. So here.
And it wouldn't just be 2 families, wouldn't it be 3 families? Because
Well, see,
if you took a 2-family and each unit, my understanding is each unit can add an ADU, so now it becomes a 4.
I think it's
No,
each
it's only a
parcel.
single
But
family.
that's a good point. If it's a 2-family, you can add a unit.
No, I don't think so.
You can. A residentially, any property in a residential zone can add an ADU.
It's any residential dwelling unit.
I thought
I thought it was any
single family.
It was a parcel. I thought it was by
I think
parcel.
it goes by parcel.
I think
but
it's
a
by parcel.
residentially zoned parcel. So if you have a 2-family in a residentially zoned parcel, you can add one by right.
I didn't realize that, so we have.
What we're doing here is
But I think it's only
Dangerous.
one unit per
unless you go for there's some kind of a special permit clause.
Which that's what, when we get to that, we can discuss
Let's
that
switch
too.
gears and work on ADU. It's more fun.
Well, I'm just thinking, well, on that, all I wanted to do was say that it should refer to a site plan approval. So does that change anything about applicability here?
So we want to say no multifamily building.
The reason it says excluding, I mean, apparently we've learned from MBTA communities that a 2-family is not considered multifamily in definitions elsewhere in state.
So it should actually be
Zoning.
saying no multifamily building, including 2-family
Yeah.
residences. It should be, right?
Everything but a single has to go for site plan review.
Isn't that, Am I interpreting, including two-family residences?
Yeah.
As well as attached single-family residences?
I think you just say and attached.
And, yeah.
Can I take you on it? Sure, of course.
They just, they're so that repetitive now, Cheyenne.
Residences.
Okay.
So I think that achieves what we want to say, correct?
I think ADU says ADU on same lot with the principal dwelling. I don't think it's a residential.
It says it's not considered a two-family, like on the state's website.
Which is really weird.
There's an ADU section on the website, which I was looking at the last couple of days. And that's where I thought it said single-family too, but I'd
Because
have to
then
go back.
it's like, I took a note, the three-family would be considered a principal dwelling, so the argument could be made that an ADU could be constructed.
I think it was
The
unclear with
statute,
the
the
HLC.
statute does not say single-family dwelling,
Okay.
It's a residential parcel.
according to Judy Barrett when I watched her video.
Okay. All right. Well, then I only did the HLC one, so. All right. Well, I guess this takes care of that for now on the site plan review, right? So then I'd say on the mixed use, we do have some mixed use already, right? So how is it considered, like, let's say the building that Elliott Physical Therapy and the two residences are considered, let's say they wanted to alter that. What does that fall under? What's triggering site plan approval?
That should be site plan review modification under natives. I don't know.
So you could say construction, reconstruction, or alteration of a mixed-use building shall be in conformity with site plan, just like the business one above it. Any size, right? Or you can put more than 800 square feet, I guess. No, actually, maybe what we do is just put it in the commercial, sorry. Why don't, put it in B, say of a commercial or mixed-use building?
That's what I thought we
Yeah,
had
that's what we
said,
should
or
do,
that's what I
yeah.
thought.
Sorry, Cheyenne.
Last time.
Let's just put it up with the commercial in paragraph B. I think you could put mixed use right on the second line where commercial is, though. There you go.
Do you want to add or there of a mixed use? Is it
Or commercial.
building of a mixed use and then or commercial building, Cheyenne?
Yeah. That should do it. And then take out the C.
That seems to just simpler.
Just an aside, why do I keep seeing endorsement of approval? Why can't it just be approval?
And that's the old language, that part, so, yeah. I don't know where that language came from, or if you want to change it.
Because that's maybe how it's
I don't know.
written. We endorse, our vote is to endorse a site plan approval.
Right, we're not approving it. That's a good point.
So
We're
we're,
endorsing it for the select board to pass, right?
No, because we have site plan approval.
but we're endorsing the plan is what the way it comes to us, and the decisions are usually written.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think it's and that's because that's been our motion to endorse support of the site plan approval.
It is the proper language because you could endorse a rejection too. I mean, to endorse doesn't necessarily always mean that you're in favor of it.
All right.
So I think it's a phrase.
It's
Yeah.
a term.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Can we just scroll back up? Why do we had highlighted inner residence D2? D2, was that being highlighted for a certain reason?
I think that's the old one too, but I don't know why it's there. That was in the old one.
What is it, G2?
Is that something anyone highlighted or?
I didn't intend to highlight.
I don't think we need to, yeah, we can unhighlight that.
Or just, I think, maybe I highlighted it, I don't know, but why is that called out? That zoning called out, because there's more.
Oh yeah, maybe you were thinking it shouldn't
Yeah,
have any,
like why is that called out separately?
Yeah.
Like we have others, we have like, not just D2 districts.
Doesn't tell us what a T2 is.
So I'm thinking like strike that
Because-
sentence because it's
maybe
like,
that's, well,
we should look at what D2 I think is,
Trying to figure it out.
you know, to a particular project, probably like Winter Valley or
Right,
Fuller
right, yeah,
Village or something.
that's what I
It
think.
mentions
That's-
nursing
yes.
homes, healthcare.
yeah,
Nursing homes, healthcare.
because we don't want to be reviewing every single family addition, home addition.
No, D2 is definitely a kind of
A project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that's okay to leave in that.
But just I'm wondering why it's called out, not all of them called out then. You know, it's like it's calling out one district, one type of multifamily, but not all of them, which is just why I was wondering why that was done that way.
Was that Tim's language? Did Tim put that in there?
It was in the
From our
existing,
original
existing language, it was.
Well, if we deleted it, would town council recognize it?
I think
and
if-
add it,
I think we should keep it
and then he can
and
delete.
delete it
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
If we delete it now,
You won't know.
we may overlook something that we should have kept.
Okay.
Classes of
All right, so
districts, classes of districts.
application and submission requirements.
Well, maybe this needs to be the planning board, if it's not the planning department, because the second sentence says the planning board will determine. So if there's a conference, I don't know, like, do we,
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have an opinion as to who has the conference, I don't think.
this,
Should it be, I mean, I would think at first it should go to the planning department. And maybe at that point, this is sort of what I was thinking, at that point, the planning department could meet with any other potentially affected department heads and kind of go through it. You know,
well, so I think we should just delete at the conference. Because, so they're going to have the conference with the planning department. And then who's going to determine if the proposal is in conformity or?
You could leave the at the conference and just change from planning board to the planning department.
or town
That's right.
staff.
The planning department will determine if the proposal is in conformity.
That's what I would say.
Because I would think if you put your, you know, as Jim said, put yourself into the shoes of the applicant, you kind of want to get as much stuff done prior to coming to a planning board meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they
Because the
meet now
planning-
with them, yeah.
Yeah, because the planning board only meets twice a month. So if you can hash out all the particulars before, it saves time.
100%.
And that will speed up the process. And then the applicant might not need an attorney there, you know, it's,
Or the planning department might say, this is egregious,
yeah.
do something else. Seriously, they just might steer them.
All right, so this gives the department and the board some opportunity before a meeting.
Because when you come to the planning board, you submit, you start the clock. And it's, then the planning board, has to.
I think the way this is written works because the initial review is the planning department. And in addition, the board may hold pre-application conferences at any regular or special meeting of the board to discuss the proposed development and any unusual features on the site that require special treatment. So we have preserved for the board, that opportunity, but yet charged to the department with the initial review. I guess that's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, then you keep going. We don't, unless we change this, we don't have a waiver from site plan approval, right? Based on project size and impact. So I think what I highlighted in yellow would need to be struck at this point anyway. But
That whole sentence, so that
but then
you also provide an opportunity to discuss.
The board would need to coordinate reviews, other town approvals, traffic study. So this really,
Well, again, going back to Jim's point about the 1,000 square foot barber shop not having to do a traffic study, doesn't this give the board the opportunity to waive that?
but not say the approval. There's other places you can waive but here it's giving an idea up front whether you think it's going to be necessary or not.
Yeah, okay, I get that, yeah.
Where in the last 3 lines, it references 4 lines, I guess. Submission of brief explanatory material, including property owner's name, assessors map, site address, plot plan, if available, sketch or description of proposed changes. This also could be a new development, right? It's not just a proposed change. Couldn't it be new development or proposed changes?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So are we taking out that grant or waiver from site plan approval?
I think so.
Yeah.
So delete the yellow part.
Yeah. And 2, we don't need.
Yeah, I think you do need
also provide
to.
an opportunity to discuss the procedures and information the board.
I think you need to coordinate reviews.
Yeah, 2 coordinate.
And request analyses. I don't think you need I don't think you need the semicolon after approval.
Right, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, are we good with the rest?
I think so.
Okay, so moving down to submission.
Oh, wait, there's, yeah, sorry.
saying
Yes, okay.
So you were saying take out and these rules and regulations because it's prescribed by the zoning bylaw, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So take out the yellow, yeah. So I don't think the review fee here, because let me just see. Yeah, so it's duplicative with some provision down below in 7. So I think we could strike this. The board shall obtain an estimate, those sentences. It's duplicative, that's all. It's not that it's removing it entirely. Yeah. So again, thought this is duplicative with submission requirements, but maybe what needs to happen is somebody needs to review the two and see if something's missing, from one or the other. So I'll take this one if you guys want, the plan and plan content.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Plus, you're familiar with,
Yeah, no, I think that's
with what you've had to do.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
4.4.
synthesize those.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Excuse me.
Okay. So move to 4.5. What's that? Or 5, submission requirements. Are you looking through that as part of it?
Yeah, so it would be
That's-
those two sections, 4.4 and 5.
It's just too lazy to go through it.
Well, it does take
You know, but you burn out after a bit of looking at this stuff.
And then it's just choosing which words are better. It comes down to word choice a lot.
Well, also, like if there's industry standard language for
yes.
some things, you know.
Some things have changed since, a lot of this.
Yeah.
Photometric plans, what is that?
I do like at least for now, the things that we talked about last time with things like putting in a trigger, for traffic and shadow studies, but so I'll keep those in. So that puts us down to procedures, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm just looking under procedures here. The language is used, application to the Department of Planning and Community Development. I think we should be consistent in that language. Either we use Department of
That's the
Planning
official
and Community
department. That's the official title, right?
Right. So we really should have
shorten
that.
it to planning department, but
I think it should be consistent. And we don't have to change that right now, but maybe Cheyenne, you could go through at some point. I don't know what the other
I think it
members
should be
think.
the shorter one.
Planning department.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
As long as we're consistent.
Maybe at
what
the
you could do-
beginning. Yeah. Yeah.
You could put it at the very beginning, put the whole thing out, and then put in parentheses, planning department. And
Good job. That's exactly what you do.
Okay, so we'll note that when we go through. Okay, so procedures.
I think otherwise this is fine.
Wait, hold on.
I just
Sorry,
felt,
can you go back for 1 second? Sorry, just was looking at one thing. Okay. Outside consultants, is that our next?
yeah. I pulled that from the MBTA community zoning, which I had inserted into that.
I think that's good.
I think it's more complete than the part we struck earlier.
The only thing about the part we struck is that it had the opportunity to refund the money if we didn't use the consultant. Right? there was a portion of the money would be returned back to the applicant if the cost was less, I think. I thought that was kind of neat. It's not a deal breaker for me, it just doesn't seem to be in here.
Yeah, here it just says that we may require that they pay a review fee consisting of the reasonable costs.
Yeah, if the fee isn't used, it would be returned to the applicant, you know? I don't know how that works.
What that's presuming is that you pay in an amount before you know what the fees are.
Right.
Whereas here, I think you get the fee proposals and then they pay those amounts. So there's like nothing.
Except if the guy
set
doesn't,
amount.
It's a set
for
amount.
some reason the guy withdraws his application and the guy doesn't show up at the meeting. You get that money back, or is it just not a detail not worth chasing? You know, if I'm an applicant and whenever my traffic study, we hire a peer reviewer, but then I withdraw my application for whatever reason, kind of like the Fruit Center did. But I've paid the money to the peer reviewer, but he doesn't show up. Do I get my money back, or no?
I wouldn't think so.
So that's a whole nother discussion that I want to have at some point, is I need to understand our peer reviewers a little bit more than I understand them. So I'm just making, put that somewhere, because I'm not understanding that whole, the whole peer review.
Does I don't want to,
No, I'm done.
oh yeah, okay. You can keep going.
I probably could keep going, but it's 10 o'clock.
Definitely don't want to interrupt you if you're on a roll. But that last sentence, the board may engage, I'm wondering, engineers, architects, blah, 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 in analyzing an application to ensure compliance with all relevant laws, bylaws, and regulations. Is there anything else that we want to include, that it has to be in compliance with that? And I think of design standards, I think of
Yes,
zoning.
so that's
An architectural review of.
and it's best practices. So that's part of my problem that I'm having, is we as town committees, we're coming up with policies and best practices that our consultants are not aware of
Yeah.
a lot of times, because our best practices are done in these committees, you know.
Well, as long as they need to be adopted by some authority, you know, like, because the committees don't have authority. Like, so, like, if it's a stormwater kind of thing, I think it has to be adopted by DPW, for example. If it's a zoning, then it would have to go to town meeting. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it can't be that those are just standalone separate regulations, I don't think, or best practices. They need to go to the next level of how they get incorporated.
Okay.
But as far as,
That's
like,
what the town engineer told me.
what, the same thing?
Because because I want, you know, we had a presentation from the engineering department on low impact design standards. What have we done to adopt those? You know, we've wasted town staff time, we've wasted our time, Climate Action Committee's doing all sorts of stuff. But if when an applicant comes in and they present a stormwater plan and there's no best practices, there's no reason for a rain garden, there's none of that, they're not designing, because they don't know to design. They're not looking at it for our best practices.
Right, so the stormwater regs, I thought, that, you know, come through the DPW, but I agree, like, it was a long ago that we were told we needed to update those, and we needed to update some zoning too, but then, you know, there's been staff changes at DPW too, or at engineering and so forth, and so sometimes things have just fallen off, and I think stormwater expertise doesn't lie, you know, in the planning board.
So then it lies with our consultants.
Yeah.
And so our consultants, I think in this, they need to be made aware is what our vision is, what the town's vision is. So when they're reviewing a stormwater plan, they're looking at it through the lens of, you know, oh, they want more rain gardens, or they want more pervious.
So my question for that would be, does the planning board update its rules and regs, or does DPW update the stormwater regs that we have? I thought it's
that's the way
DPW,
DPW,
but
that's right.
I think, if coming out of the Climate Action Planning Committee, if there's recommendations, then those recommendations should go to the engineering department with a copy to planning board, planning department, building department. So,
But the
town administrator. So somebody makes sure that it gets followed
So the
up.
low impact design standard presentation came from the engineering department. So
To the planning board.
To the planning board, but it's in the engineering department, which is in the DPW. And the engineering department is hiring the peer consultants for stormwater. So that's all in one department, but they're not letting their consultants know
That this is the plan.
that this is our best practices. And it's all in one department.
I see.
But it's not the same consultant every time, right? So we
Right,
have to send it out to every
because
single
they
consultant we sub out
choose,
to.
the applicant chooses the cheapest consultant,
The applicant or we do?
the applicant. So the
So like Sean Reardon with the memory clinic.
Well, we
The applicant
offer.
chose him?
we offer a list.
We offer a list.
Yeah,
that's
we
what my
provide.
understanding.
Yeah. But my point on this,
But I'm
though.
getting off topic.
Okay, yeah. All I was getting at is the board is securing the opportunity to hire a professional to analyze whether the plan is in compliance. And I'm just saying are we too restrictive if we're only saying we want to make sure that we can hire that person to make sure you're in compliance with all relevant laws, bylaws, and regulations, or should there be more there? Is it relevant laws, bylaws, regulations, zoning, design standards? What else do we want to be able to have the ability to say that you have to be in compliance with these?
I think the more the better.
Zoning is bylaws, right?
I don't know. It could
Zoning
be.
is a bylaw,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to.
Plan review is a
There's no
bylaw.
reason to create duplicity. I just want to make sure.
Because what if, like, we end up having some best practices, but we just haven't had a chance to adopt them into an official bylaw, but we've put all the effort in and we just haven't gotten to town meeting.
I think that's hard. I think that's hard.
Yeah,
We
I think that's
can't-
hard,
I don't
too.
think we can hold an applicant to.
Fortunately.
To comply with conversations that are taking place in a planning board meetings.
I actually felt like the applicant for the Gardner School had a really strong argument that, we're coming in following your regs. And, he's right. We haven't followed up with, the things that we really would like to see, which
That's
is
what
this is part of it.
triggered my calling, was his comments, yeah.
Yeah, so if with regard to the comment I made, if the board feels that all relevant laws, bylaws, and regulations captures everything that we're telling an applicant that they have to be in compliant with, then fine. I wouldn't want a board at some future date to be challenged by an applicant that says, well, that is not, I'm not going to pay for that engineer or that architect because, you're now asking me to be, compliant with something that isn't listed within your site plan approval. That was all.
Good point. I mean, I don't know. I would defer to a lawyer for that
Would
one.
you say something like in other, well, it says with all relevant laws. And
Something like that. I would like make a note that says, should there be more here?
Yeah.
And show
Yeah,
it to our lawyer.
just
Say,
put a
"Lawyer, what do you
comment in,
think?"
right?
It's like, we're going to be here all day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's on page 6.
yeah. I think, Cheyenne, if you just put in parentheses, anything else to include here, at the end of that sentence, and we'll figure that out later. Thanks, Cheyenne.
So for me, this says we're going to establish standards for site plan review, as if it's something separate from what we're doing here. So I thought, aren't these the standards that we're setting somewhere in here? So I just felt like that language, but then if you look at it, an ecosystem function isn't a standard either. So like the language.
it's the wrong words. It's the wrong words.
Do we even need to articulate what the review standards are?
I think so,
so,
because
yeah.
it gives us a basis for the decision.
Right.
And partially I liked that because, again, back to the Gardner School, the topography of that site is so
Steep, yeah.
that they are, and the same thing happened at the 40B on Randolph Ave. They came in and destroyed like the whole ecology of that.
So can I just tell you that I was the witness for the town in the appeal to the HLC, and their decision came back and they dismissed everything I said about site planning, and they took a civil engineer's testimony over mine for that. So that led me to believe that no matter the way they're making their decisions made no sense. But coming back to this review standards, maybe what this needs to say, the planning board will consider the following, I don't know
Just
what
the
words.
following.
The following in determining compliance or something, or in rendering a decision or something like that, because we want to consider these things, but they aren't standards themselves, right? So, but otherwise, these are the things that we do want to consider. Then we go down further, and I think we do have some standards to consider.
Yeah, I don't know why H is in this. We're a planning department. Why is an applicant's social equity, diversity, public health, or community needs part of, we're a planning department?
Yeah, I
That
think
doesn't fit
This
with
is
everything
just-
else.
yeah.
I saw that
Get rid of
somewhere
it.
else too and questioned it.
So Tim said these standards were borrowed from Lexington, so.
There was one thing, yeah, I just wanted to add at the bottom, because I had taken this from Natick, and it's under design guidelines. There was a bottom line, consistency of aesthetic character, including bulk and height of surrounding buildings.
I think they got put somewhere else.
I just wanted to put that, it was put under the design guidelines, and it doesn't make sense to put it there.
Oh,
So it
okay.
should be actually a Z, moved to under that previous section.
I don't know that we can really consider ecosystem function either, honestly. I don't know how we were qualified to determine that.
I don't think we can.
I think we have to eliminate ecosystem function.
I have a note that says remove A, D, E, F, and H, which might be a little extreme, but I'm with you.
No, I think I added A because consideration of site design.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's fine. I was just,
We did have, there was a Y in there before. Is that?
Jeez, we're a little all
So there
over
was
the
a
place.
Y that was,
Space, natural features.
Well, Cheyenne,
other aspects.
she's trying to keep up with us.
Oh yeah, no, that's great, because we took out that other.
Yeah, so Cheyenne, when you're ready, E, you can delete D, ecosystem function. I'm not sure how we do the protection of that surface and groundwater quality. But do we leave that? Maybe that's where we can hire
That's where we have our
consultants.
consultants
Yeah,
do that. That's
okay.
what I was,
Okay.
I saw that staying.
Safety, like what safety? I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me because we have circulation safety, pedestrian safety. Safety's too, like, how does somebody know whether
yeah,
it's too
get rid of
vague?
that.
Very broad, yeah.
So, yeah, get rid of that. What's this potential adverse effects of development? Who put that in?
That was taken from Natick also. I think that has to do with, lighting. Is it too, is the impact of a project on abutting, on neighbors, is it
So
have a
if-
detrimental effect?
So I think here, instead of saying avoidance of major, we should just say we were going to consider topographic changes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So get rid of avoidance of major
I agree.
to be consistent.
And I guess that's who determines what's like a major change? Like, is it greater than a certain percentage? And I don't know if I saw something, I don't know if I put it here, but it was, I think they defined it as like, I don't know, more than 15%, or I don't know. I don't know the correct.
Well, this is just saying we're going to consider topographic change, so
Yeah.
maybe when we get further down.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my questions was, should we have a definitions page? And substantial change was one of mine.
Yeah.
And simple development was another one, and minor site plan was another one. It's like, who determines this? So I just wonder if we should have
Yeah.
page 1 be definitions to define all this stuff. Those are just 3 that I picked up, and there could be plenty more.
Yeah, well, we could have a definition.
And some things are subjective, though. I think sometimes when we look at, is a minor site plan approval, is it a minor amendment or is it a major amendment? That is, sometimes becomes,
When
What's
the,
major to you might not be major to you, right?
Right.
So,
when I think of Natick, and I think you were referring to Natick earlier, Natick is a really diverse town.
Yeah.
Natick has some real significant commercial areas. It has a ton of residential areas. It has plenty of mixed use areas. I mean, we don't have that kind of a town. They may have to have that kind of definition because that's the very different types of applications that they might see. I just don't see Milton ever having like such a variety of applications. We just probably won't. So, creating a list of definitions would be a lot of work and probably not a lot of benefit, I don't think.
I do think that you're right about the major minor in a place like Natick, which has big malls and everything else. This list has some duplication also. If we keep going down, like open space, there's addressed twice. Signage is addressed twice. Utilities addressed twice. So it seems like this just needs somebody to clean it up.
I can look at that with Cheyenne and
Okay.
go through that, yeah.
All right, so you'll do that one, great. Then I pulled all of this in from the design standards from the Article 1 MBTA communities that I spent, as you all know, I've spent time on, right? So we would have to change the references to the MCMOD, right? So like I said, I just brought it in, so we'd have to check that kind of reference. But these were also looked at by HLC because a draft was sent to them.
Yeah.
So for something that's, as of right, so I feel like it's a good place to have them as standards. I can review them again just to see if we want to think about it with respect to something like ADUs or businesses,
Right.
which I haven't done. So I'll do that if you'd like for the next round, so we don't have to go through them all tonight. But you've already seen them all, before, so it's just kind of tailoring them a little bit. All right, so I'll do that.
Did we talk about the authority under number 10, the authority of the board?
I think that was.
Yeah, I think that was at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it was highlighted under C, if such power is reserved by the board in its original approval. And I think you probably highlighted that, Cheryl, because we wanted to reserve that right, even if we didn't say it in the very beginning.
Right, exactly.
So under authority, under C, 10C, where did we go? Sorry. Yeah, right.
Sorry, I'm not seeing 10C.
On page 12?
Is it? Yeah. Just after the paragraph 9, design guidelines. I think it was, there, wait.
Yeah, it's formally number 7, 9.22, page 12.
Building design, wait. Those are numbered a little bit different.
Yeah.
Page 12, tell her scroll to page 12, I think. Authority of the board, the planning board may reject. Is that what you're talking about?
This is page 12.
Down the bottom? Yeah, the very bottom of page 12. Meredith, is that where you are?
No, I wasn't that far yet, unless it's just the way it was inserted. It was under, it was titled Authority of the Board.
So
Right there. So
Yeah.
it's numbered differently.
it's number 22 on this.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay.
So under C, it had been there. If such power is reserved by the board, yes. We just wanted to strike that. Sorry, it got bumped down with
No, computer done. I'm done.
the additional.
It's a sign. It's definitely
My
a
computer
sign.
died. Sorry, I'm out.
So, okay. So sorry, so back up to authority of the board, but then design guidelines, okay. But then there was actually some additional. So if we go back up to where we have the review standards, Cheyenne? Yeah, so yeah, right where we just were before. And then scroll down just a little bit more. So general development standards. So this is where, Cheryl, you said you were
Right,
going to take that piece.
right.
Okay, through,
All the way through the building, site and building standards, which would take you to, next would be design guidelines. That paragraph also we had in the MBTA zoning. So this just reserves the right to do, guidelines. This should be said, this should actually say design guidelines, not standards. I typed in there for you, Cheyenne.
okay.
Jim, you added the endless hearings.
Oh boy, yes, I sure did. So my fear is that we condition something to death, or we just make it so expensive that it's not feasible, or we just drag it out. I'm looking at it as the applicant. So I mean, obviously that's not good wording, but I just don't know how to, if you guys agree, how to put that in there so the applicant doesn't feel they're just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So they eventually just freak out and go 40B.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's something we can ask town council about how to phrase.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
No, it is.
I
It's
definitely
something,
do. I
and
just did this as a placeholder, so I didn't.
And I can relate to that.
Yep.
There should be some sort of, process that is like
Yeah, I mean,
gets
I wanted
wrapped
to
I
put
up.
a
think some
timeline
things
on
do
it.
take longer,
No, but
it's hard
not
to.
like 2 years.
No.
Shouldn't.
Yeah.
But it's hard to put a finite, we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're limiting ourselves.
Right.
Well, with a, I mean,
Obviously, we want it to move along as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but how long is this document? I mean, if we impose a 12 or 15 page document on somebody and then drag them out for a year, I think we're doing something wrong.
No,
I
that's
want
why.
to put a timeline of like 6 months on it, and then which can be extended if we can't, if we're waiting, or I think I put something in that kind of addresses like if COVID happens and we can't meet, we extend, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think this is one to be really careful with, because we could subject the town to a position that the town might not want to be in. You know what I mean? It's just, we just have to be careful. I understand where you're going with, but
Right.
I mean, we've heard the stories in the past, but I wasn't a member of those boards, and we have no idea of what was going on or what was not being done. And there may have been justification for some of those prolonged approvals. We just don't know. You know what I mean? I don't agree with them, but that they took so long. But I think we just have to be careful that we don't handcuff a future board with something that might be.
One thing to bear in mind is if a board asks for something as a document or consideration and it doesn't happen, that can delay it. The other thing is we do have time limits imposed by law, and the reason we're able to continue longer than that is that the applicant is supposed to agree in writing, but oftentimes they just agree at the meetings, I think, and because they don't want, to have an unfavorable action or something, or unfavorable decision. But I think if we're more clear up front and we have those pre-file meetings, that should help with the process being shorter. So we tell them up front that this site's complicated. We want you to think about some alternatives. We want we're making it clear. We want you to think about the trees and the topography. We're making it clear up front. So then they could come in and have staff conversations and say, do you think the board would have an informal with us on this? It's much better than, I can appreciate all they spend on all the consultants to get to a full package and then to find that they have to backtrack a lot. I can understand why it's difficult, but it's also very frustrating. We saw with the memory care facility when they were so locked into a particular solution that, left little flexibility. It's not the best outcome necessarily either. So anyway. So authority of the board, decision. So I guess that first sentence there, put a big question mark.
Oh yeah, do what you want with it. It's just a suggestion.
It's a concern I have. I agree with you, Jim. I just don't know how to, include language that protects the applicant and also protects the town.
Yeah, this is where we should be just giving this to a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably something where we should review the requirements. Where this is
What do you
site
mean
plan.
review the requirements?
This is one of the things I don't understand 100%, but site plan approval is one that's not in state law somehow, whereas special permits are. And maybe Cheyenne can clear up my language on this.
Well, I understand
but because that's what I've heard about site plan approval. There's actually legislation that's been filed different times about making it part of the state law, which would set the timeframes. And in fact, I probably have it, and it probably does state a time frame. But I guess by statute, right, site plan approval doesn't have those same
it's not enforceable from what I
regulations,
understand.
but that's special permits do.
Yeah, if the applicant blows us off, I don't think we have any recourse. I don't think we can deny. If they come in here and say, I'm not doing a traffic study, and I'm not doing a whatever study, and then we say, I don't think we can deny them based on that.
Yeah.
That's the way I understand the law, but once again, I could be wrong. I'm not a lawyer. I still think a lawyer should be looking at all this.
It has to be based on one of our criteria. That's what we make a judgment on, or we make a decision on, and then it can be appealed. But if we have, and that's why it's so important to have all of this in there, and then it's as specific as we can make it without being a special permit, but yet, so we have grounds for what our decision is.
Yeah, so that might not be right if they give us all the info.
I actually think, though, Jim, this area where it says decision, this is something that should be reviewed by town council. All the other stuff up prior to that is really much more planning and, related. This particular piece has nothing to do with planning. It has to do with, what's fair, what's legal, what you can do, what you can't do. I think that's where we should definitely have.
That's why I think what was in here, simply the decision of the planning board shall be made by a majority vote of the board as constituted. And it used to say, i.e., 3 affirmative votes. So that I think could stay. But that's all it said before.
Yeah, if you want to strike all this stuff, once again, I'm just thinking as an applicant, if I come in here and, I can see why 440 threatened to go 40B, and I can see why the memory clinic threatened to go 40B, because we just push them.
But that process actually wasn't very long, to be honest.
The memory clinic was, over a year?
It was not a very long process. I don't
The
think.
amount of material that
a
was
year?
included in the application, that was, I would say,
I don't think it was a very long process.
for a significant project like that, that's typical.
I'm saying, don't scratch the language. I'm saying, let town council look at it and tell us, what we should keep and what we shouldn't keep from a legal standpoint. I wouldn't scratch it,
And you can,
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
It's better to leave even that first sentence and leave it all there and ask for advice,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even have our peer review consult, there were things that they couldn't even go through, until certain things were done. That Sean Reardon, that was a lot of peer review work that needed to be done.
Oh yeah, all the hydrology, you mean on the memory clinic? Oh yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Good one to cut my teeth on.
A lot of hydrology.
And we also have to have the input, the neighborhood,
Yeah. No, and we do a great job of listening to everyone.
Yeah.
I love what we do. I don't have any regrets. I just think that
Yeah, so we can get an opinion, and maybe there's something there that it wouldn't create more problems than,
right. Yeah.
You know.
That's, yeah. My legalese isn't the best.
no. Okay, so is this a good point for us to take a break
I think so.
and then pick up with the limited review standards next?
Love it.
Does that sound good?
Cheyenne, can you show us how much more of this document remains?
All of Maggie's.
You're going to delete everything.
I just want to make sure when I concur with Meredith, I do it with good reason. Yes, Meredith, I think that's a good idea.
So let me
A
just,
lot of it can be cut and pasted mine. And
And I'm sorry, I did want to get to your stuff, Maggie, but.
Sure, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
wait, just quickly, the items we didn't get to on the agenda, was it just the ADUs? Just for anybody who's watching and was interested in an item on the agenda, is it going to be on the next meeting
Sign,
agenda?
I wanted to just talk about, and again, not for February town meeting, I just wanted to talk about some of the issues that have been coming up with the signage review committee, problems that I think could be avoided if we amend, and Tim kept saying we should amend our signage review bylaw. So just for a few, this is not a priority right now, but I think it's something that we should address, is just talking about that. I know there's another, I think there's going to be an application for another gas station wanting to do digital signage. So it's, and billboards, like we don't have any, and everything that we're putting into our design standards, we don't have the signage.
Wait, so do you
We do, but
think-
they only can go by the bylaw, so.
We have them draft something up and we look at
No,
theirs.
we do the zone, it's our zoning, it's based on our zoning.
But what do we want to get? I mean,
We
I
do,
would think
Tim
that we would-
actually has a draft of that I'll share, but we won't go into that in
So
detail.
perhaps then, I do think it actually is a little bit time sensitive, because there have been a lot of signs coming. Would we ever want to have the chair of the sign review committee come and look at all the work that was done in Milton Village and East Milton by consultants? Because if you looked at the signs that Josh was even talking about in his document tonight, they're very different than what the sign.
So Tim drafted something that in 2015, it goes into detail, it's very specific, and I'll get that, and Cheyenne, or maybe Julia, you pulled that for me, send it out to the board members and let everybody review it, because the sign review committee can only review, and they can only approve or not approve things that are in our bylaws. So it's helpful, it would be helpful to them if we gave them, if we had something that was part of our sign bylaw. But
So they don't have like discretion, really. They can't say, you know what, that's not like the best look we're going for. We want this
a
look.
little bit, but they really don't have, it's like their site plan review. It's like they don't have, it's like they have, it's not in their regulations or where the regulations, or there's things that are in there that had never been approved before in Milton that are all of a sudden, they have no choice but to approve, like neon signs. So it's,
Wouldn't we want to get their input, like have them put together a quick outline of what they would want and then build on that? Seeing as they do it more than we do?
I think it's
They're not giving advice, from what I'm hearing.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
should we ask them? They would give it if we asked them, right? It's not like they're not allowed to give advice.
it's what we would like to see to be allowed in the town, and then, yeah, they
Okay, yeah, I just think you.
respond to that, because they used to say no neon signs, no certain things that were never allowed. They say no to them, but then it gets appealed. They go before the select board, and we do have it in that the select board can overturn. So that's how we get the rebuilt, digital signs, the things that we're trying to avoid if
No,
possible.
I get it, yeah, so they just know they know what they don't want, right? They must.
No, they don't even know that.
Really? Our sign review committee doesn't know.
No, because they're just going by they're not giving input in design. That's why instead of going to select board, do you think they should be coming here? Because we're the ones talking to the consultants for like in coming up with.
When I need plumbing advice, I go to my plumber. When I need electrical advice, I go to my electrician. If I need sign advice, I would go to the sign review committee and ask them what they think.
Well, yeah.
Bring them in and then build on that. No, you guys look at me like I'm crazy. Okay, I guess I don't understand. It's all good.
But so that was just one thing, and I did want to, one other thing that we need to do an article on, which is very simple, and it's on the mapping, our zoning map, our Milton Village zoning map and Brook Road, that overlay zoning was never added to the map, and that has to be an article to change our zoning map.
Is that
So
be
Tim-
for February?
So I think we could do that for February. Tim has drafted language on that. It's in our inbox, but that was in late edition that was added to our agenda.
I didn't see the maps, though. Do we
was no
have the
map.
map?
What was no map?
So do we need the maps to accompany it?
We'll need the maps. Cheyenne, correct? Is that?
It references the lot, the book and page. So if you go on the GIS, you can find them.
But I'm pretty sure like the map itself has to be updated.
Just like the MBTA, you needed the map.
We'll need to do a map.
There's no map.
Right.
So
I'll get those for you.
So I just wanted,
That for
sorry, I don't
future.
want to delay us too long, but we have the meeting on December 12th, on the December 19th, January 6th, and January 23rd. And special town meeting is February 24th, right? So I just want us to be realistic about how many meetings we have left for the ADU and the site plan, and then for that map.
Right.
So, and if we have, when did we have Gardner coming back? Gardner School?
They wanted, Cheyenne, was that
Like
the
a
first
month.
meeting or the second
12th?
meeting? And I think that might have been the 12th. We should confirm
I'll confirm.
with them.
And so do we know when we need language submitted to the warrant committee, just even for printing? Are they,
So-
can they?
Yeah, so I did ask, that was one of the questions. That's why I think if they could have, if we could get it to town council to start looking it over to make sure there's nothing in there, especially with the ADU, having them look at that. I think early January.
All right, so we have to really be pretty diligent on the next 3 meetings to get
Yeah.
those zoning articles, I guess is my point, right?
Yeah.
3 meetings for the 3.
So we're going to do the same process as we do with the site plan review for the ADU bylaw. we're all going to sit here and edit it. as
And
we-
I'll edit mine a little bit better.
And we can submit it to them, and we can amend it, even though it's been submitted to the warrant committee. They can begin, looking at it, but, there's things that we can change too. It doesn't have to be final draft language.
Has to remain in scope though, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
With the intention of a green sheet or
And
just?
we may even have to add another meeting in January just to, if we are at a place, but it would be really nice to be able to get these on the February.
So
20th.
I think, I don't know the best way that we want to do, you were going to tackle a section, I'm going to tackle 2 sections, and you're doing 1, Sean. The document is getting pretty messy. So I don't know how best we want to do it. I think maybe a separate document that can just copy and bring it in.
I'm happy to do my section as a separate document. I'll send it to Cheyenne
Yeah,
and
and then-
Meredith, and you guys can.
And then maybe Cheyenne can do the incorporation of those sections so we can have a little cleaner document to look at.
I agree.
Okay. And do you think it makes sense to try to just knock site plan out and then take up ADU?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we should get
Yeah.
through it. I do.
Okay.
yeah.
All right. That's all I'll hold this up for then.
Okay.
I think he had a motion.
I'll make a motion
Is there a second?
to
Second.
close the meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.